Police and auditor. आवाज तो आने दीजिए। Sir Lloyd trial advocacy.
डॉक्टर मधुकर शर्मा ने अपने आप को म्यूट किया।
हम कैसे म्यूट करेंगे?
Morning, sir. Sir, we are just waiting for Justice Thurai Raja, Honorable Mr. Justice Thurai Raja to join, sir.
Madhukar sir, he has already joined. So we can act. I think he has joined.
Yes. Sir has joined.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thairani.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning,
Yeah.
sir.
Nice
Very
to see
well.
you.
Professor Chauhan, regards to you.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. Very good morning.
Good morning to all of you, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Justice Thurai Raj as well. Good morning to you. Yeah.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well.
Good morning, Justice. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, with due permission of Honorable Mr. Justice Thurai.
Are we starting?
Yes, sir. Maybe begin.
That's good. Okay. Good
Yes.
morning and virtually a remote good morning to all my friends. Hope everything is going fine. Right. Shall we call the meeting in order? Lovely.
Yes, sure.
I'm not intent to make a speech or anything. I just want to share a little bit of what the topic today and invite the experts to speak on that field. Now, right to education during pandemic. Now here we have, in my personal view, there are three issues. One is what's the right? Number two, what is education? Number three, what is pandemic now? The right is, as we know in all the part, that's a basic need of a person. The education is, there are people who defines it differently. The major or the majority people think what we learn in the book and what the certificate we get is the education. I think that's patently wrong. Education is from the birth. The best teacher or the first and the best teacher is the mother, really. She taught us from the womb. From there we grow up and we learn everything and we come up. Of course, the father guides us from the day of birth. Then comes the pandemic issue. Pandemic is, I might say, it's just one of the beginning. With all due respect, and it's a disaster. It is just one issue from the beginning. We don't know how many pandemics we are going to face because we faced a tsunami, we faced cyclones, and that is to a regional part or a small portion. Then comes, it didn't affect the global wise, across the globe. When it affects the entire globe, then everybody feels there is something. Now we'll come back to the entire topic, right to education in the pandemic time. Now, everybody should have the right to learn. I'm using the word little differently now. Education, I'm going to say that learn during the pandemic. Here comes, we have issues. Everybody says, okay, it's fine. I'm at home, I'm working at home, I'm learning at home, or I'm studying at home. And we have seen the people have been just promoted, quote and unquote, just promoted to the next class. No exams, no mix-ups, no preparations, they passed. And there are people who got certificates. I don't want to use the word degree. We call it as distant learning. And they looked at the computer or they looked at the iPhones or the phones, the smartphones, and they think they have learned something and they have answered the questions and they have got a degree certificate or getting a degree certificate. Is it worth or is it going to be useful for them to use it in the future? Leaving that aside, do we have any choice? I think the speakers will be worried. Oh, what is this? Where am I leading it to? No, I'm just sharing some of my thoughts. What can we do now in this pandemic situation? Are we going to say, no, leave all these things out? We go to the schools, we go to the colleges, we learn. Is it possible? Okay, so in that case, how are we going to maximize with the available resources, technology, time, space, and the mixing levels? All those things. I think I should not disturb the learned speakers more. Wish you all the best and let us start, and in between we will share our views. Thank you very much and all the best for all our participants.
Shah, sir.
Yes. Is it,
Okay.
Shall we invite Dr. Manoj Kumar to address the gatherings?
Sure. Thank you so much, Honorable Justice Thurai Raja. It's really nice to have you here and have the discussion, kick-started by such a eloquent outline of what a right is and what a education is and what a pandemic is, and where are we swimming in between this entire matrix as we stand today. For sake of avoiding repetition, uh, I'll avoid some of the initial discussions I had, which are similar to what you mentioned, and straight away take the discussion forward. From the Indian context, we have a Right to Education Act of 2009, and I'm sure as the discussion progresses, our colleagues here on the screen will delve quite deeply into the provisions. What do they mean? Where do we stand? Was it sufficient to visualize and anticipate and therefore deal with situations like what we crossed last year as an unprecedented pandemic? Is the pandemic over? In my view, no. This is just the beginning. Even this particular pandemic, it's going to be around for at least half a decade, if not more, uh, in different forms. It has chances of recurrence. It has chances of dying out only if there's a certain discipline, global discipline setting in across every nook and corner of the earth, the entire planet, and therefore that's something that is a very wide calling. So it's something that we have to learn to live with, and therefore our education system also needs to learn to live with this pandemic. And therefore, where do we stand? Our right to education, as you're well aware, and it will be touched upon, it provides a right of education to children between 6 and 14. There are certain norm settings that have been done for the schools to follow to achieve that goal. And at least prior to pandemic, or for the period prior to pandemic, we keep getting a lot of reports on the degrees of success and the challenges and hardships that the right to education implementation has faced. And I hope the other speakers will also touch upon the national education policy, because talking about an RTE today in today's context, without the national education policy, which is setting the vision going forward, it will be in the fitting of things to discuss both together. Because the right to education provides a right, and the national education policy focuses on learning more than schooling, which is precisely what Justice Thurai Raja was mentioning, that we learn from the womb, from the time we are born, and therefore the entire ecosystem is kind of a school for us, and it all depends what kind of people we meet, right from our parents till we become capable of impacting and giving learning from our end to others during this entire journey. So the national education policy focuses on learning more than schooling, and how the two are therefore going to dovetail and hold hands and walk together. Will they be a ripple effect, or will they be pulling in the same direction, is something that we'll want to hear and learn a lot more from the experts today as we go forward over the next hour or two. I'll just quickly summarize as a keynote. I don't want to spend too much time and save as much time as possible for the others to make the presentations. From the pandemic perspective, from 2020 perspective, I've just tried to, discover some pointers which are either noticeable or they have become necessary so to do going forward from the right to education perspective. And I'm trying to put them into three baskets for students, for schools, and from the policy perspective. I'll quickly touch on 3-4 points in each. From the students' perspective, one thing that has become very clear is that the hardships created by pandemic or similar situations which will go forward happen in future, essentially remote learning or online classes, etc., be it schools or even law schools for that matter. So the entire approach of having a curriculum which is a mile wide and an inch deep is something which will need to be changed, and we'll need to work more on deeper curriculums which kind of bring about a learning that a student can carry forward and integrate in their own pursuit as they go forward. and therefore much deeper learning related aspects to be built into the curriculum, and more stress on vocational training is something that will be very, very important. And third is, I'll also discuss on it from the policy thrust, is the ability to give access to learning materials. The traditional schooling of chapters and exams, and even for that matter, boards which happen at 10th standard, by that time, most of a major part of the learning curve has been crossed. So therefore, it is during this entire age of 6 to 14 that we're talking about, on an average around 8th standard, which is still a couple of years away from the boards. At this time, the entire focus on access to learning material remotely, uh, uh, vocational training, and of course a much deeper curriculum is something from the student's perspective. Quickly moving on to how the schools need to be shaped up or given space. Couple of things which have been an asking for most educational institutions in India. One is, of course, larger self-regulation, deeper self-regulation, because the kind of challenges that one institution versus the other faces is very varied. So one size fits all does not really operate too well. So self-regulation, predictability on finances. There has to be a certain autonomy for financial stability of educational institutions, and these two can only be granted if there is a certain framework of transparency to which the schools as well as the regulators commit to. Then, of course, more periodic assessments on the learning perspective, which should be a parameter for marking up schools' performance, and therefore all the other benefits and recognitions that are due to them. Uh, Lastly, from the policy perspective, especially because of the national education policy which is there before us, and therefore it will also need to changes in the Right to Education Act, the way we understand it today and the way it may shape up going forward. I think the thrust is largely going to be to democratize education, to identify the stakeholders who are impacted or who make education happen. They should have the deepest say in the entire functioning of the education system. Then a more realistic and universal access to top quality education. So opening the doors is the only way out. Otherwise, we create barriers to the quality of learning that is available to students under the Right to Education framework that we set up for ourselves. Vocational, I already discussed. There should be a far more deeper. Also about the pandemic threw up one very important aspect. Pandemic was a great leveler. We have seen it ourselves on the gender issue. We could see both genders perform much better on work from home format, or for that matter, even schooling format, where physical presence to schools and institutions were not required. And therefore, from the gender perspective, from social strata perspective, from economic strata perspective. So pandemic has taught us that we can overnight have working structures which can be great levelers to all different classifications or avoidable classifications that have crept into our system over the centuries. This needs to be strengthened under the education policy. The way to do it would be to bridge the digital divide much deeper, even in the much younger generation, so that remote access to the education system, to the platforms, to institutions, to the data banks, to the knowledge banks is all available to everyone across the social, economic, and gender strata. So this is something that is going to become more integral, and of course a much more wider outreach. The entire thrust of the Right to Education was to give access to physical schools to students from different strata. I think where we need to look at now is to take the school to the doorstep, and not really believe in the brick and mortar education system, but the knowledge, the learning curve, the teachers, and therefore connecting the pupils with the teachers. With this, I think that was my 2 bits on the learnings on the right to education from the pandemic. And since we are talking in a law school, we're discussing in the context of a law school, the kind of learning that we throw up at the elementary school level is what defines to a great extent the aptitude of people who go on to join law schools or other institutions and therefore become practice ready or make the institution a success or the curriculum a success. So it's a very relevant discussion, and I look forward to hearing from our experts on the screen here. And thank you so much, Professor Shiv Kumar and Professor Manohar Thairani, for having us over. And of course, my greetings to Professor Prashant Barua, Professor B.S. Chauhan, our elderly in the teaching profession, Professor Lukos, Professor Puneet, Mr. Satya Prakash, pleasure to connect with you. And of course, Ravi Prakash, pleasure to speak to every one of you. That's from me. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing and learning a lot more.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, everyone. And welcome to the third session of this colloquium. And now we have, amongst us, we have keynote speakers, which Manoj sir has spoken. And we have co-chairs, Professor Indra, Professor Sri Lanka Law College. And we are having speakers, Professor Balraj Chauhan, who is the VC of DNLU Jabalpur, Professor Lisa P. Lucas, Professor GGS IP University, and Dr. P. Puneet, Associate Professor JNU New Delhi, and Mr. Satya Prakash, Legal Editor, The Tribune. So with the permission of Justice Thurai Raja, may I call now Professor Indra to please say some words to us.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. Good morning. First of all, I remember with great gratitude our mentor, Padma Bhushan, Professor N.R. Madhava Menon. And there's a correction to be made. I'm not a professor or a doctor. I'm only a president's counsel. I think we can correct it. Anyway, it's okay. But this is the right to education during pandemic. And first of all, before starting, I have to say good morning and special thanks to Honorable Justice Thurai Raja from Sri Lanka, okay, a good friend and always helpful, and Dr. Sivakumar and Manohari Thairani and Kavita, who is always with me, and sending all the messages. So thank you very much. I prepared a small note in relation to this area. This is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all continents. Closure of schools and other learning spaces have impacted 94% of the world's population up to 99 in the low and lower middle income countries. Children and youth may drop out from schools because they don't have access to schools, higher educational institutions due to the pandemic and economic impact. So first thing is because they don't have access. And this is actually a new thing because they have to change everything, the mindset and what is next. Then this crisis and the unparalleled education disruption is far from over. Many countries, including Sri Lanka, have yet to announce the date for some schools to reopen and access the world. Government, parents, and children are grappling with when and how to approach the next phase. And not only the children, because in Sri Lanka, we have a policy or proposals in relation to education, but I mean, that is giving change. I mean, it's subject to certain amendments. And I think after COVID-19, we have to have a separate policy document. I think it's not too late. We have to start something now. And the children then, from 5 years, then they start schooling at the age of 5, and then they do some children, they do the scholarship examination at grade 5, then the ordinary level examination, A level, then higher education, university, or any other higher educational institution. Because now we need urgent action. Now, when you talk about education, education is not only a fundamental human right. It is an enabling right with direct impact on the realization of all other human rights. When education systems collapse, peace, prosperous, and productive societies cannot be sustained. So that is the most important thing. I mean, now, access to education. And not only education, we have to think about the financial aspect as well. The crisis in excavating pre-existing disparities by reducing the opportunities for many children, the vulnerable children, youth and adults, those living in poor and rural areas, girls, refugees, and persons with disabilities, and forcibly displaced persons to continue their studies. Now, we talk about, say, in Colombo or any other main areas, the towns, most of the children, they have the facilities. The others, they don't have the facilities. So we have to find the necessary equipment for them to do online learning. And then they have to download material from website. It's difficult to get certain information, and changing the mindsets and attitudes of facilitating standards. Then next thing is, now, after when they conduct exams, and after the exams, what are they going to, whether they have to join any vocational institution or any other career path. So that is also important. But here we are talking, I mean, it's a law school. I'm prepared to give some information regarding the law school. But anyway, I will start again from, the history or the system prevailing in Sri Lanka. Now, after they had to do anyway, with the greatest difficulty, we were able to conduct the grade 5 scholarship examination, advanced level examination, O level. Now today, we are having the law entrance examination, law college. This time is something special. Normally, we conduct the exam in Colombo. Now there are, we have district-wise, so even the students who are sometimes they are unable to attend because they have this, they have to be careful because some people, they are suffering from this COVID. So thanks to the Commissioner General of Examinations in Sri Lanka, he has provided all the facilities for the students to do the examination. Then, and the other thing is, now we are talking about children, students, and the staff members, teachers, they have, I mean, most of the teachers, they are not conversant with this online teaching. So we have to give them a training. But one thing I can tell, that we are very, I mean, you know, one step forward, that means that even the teachers now, they are learning, and that's a good thing happen after COVID, because they are also taking a keen interest in doing this virtual teaching. Then what the state has to do, the state has to provide with the necessary equipment, but only thing the state, I mean, government schools, and we have state universities. So it's, I mean, it's not that easy to provide all equipment, but anyway, the government is trying to do something for the children who are less fortunate. But actually at law college, last year, we started this virtual learning. When I called the lecturers, because they were a bit reluctant, some lecturers asked, why can't we organize it in a larger hall? I said, it's impossible, because how to find the funds? But anyway, now they are also used to it. Now, last year, we started lectures online. So the children, they got this access to learning, and most of the children, they're happy. And we, even the practical training course for the students who have passed the exam and who are the virtue of taking oaths as attorneys at law, they were able to follow lectures online. Then the other thing is, when we talk of state universities, I think the law faculty of Sri Lanka, Colombo, they actually conducted examinations online. But law college, we are not in a position to do that. And even I am facing a lot of problems to find a venue, because, you know, of the social, I mean, on the medical, we have to follow the all health guidelines. We have to keep space, then sanitization, everything we have to done. So we are doing it because the Council of Legal Education has given me permission to conduct the exam and provided me with all the facilities. Then when we talk about not only law, all other education institutions are affected by this COVID. The disruption also concerns health and psychosocial services, since education institutes all have platforms for prevention, diagnosis, and counseling. So most of the children in Sri Lanka, I mean, because they don't have access, and some they are at home, the parents, they have to suffer. And sometimes, you know, the parents are not aware what is happening because they are not conversant with the online teaching. And some families, there are 3 or 4 children. So they are not in a position to provide laptops for all the children. So these are the most difficult areas in relation to studies. Then I think it's better. I mean, now, of course, I pray that this will not continue. The third thing, I mean, sometimes, you know, they say the third wave, the second wave, third wave, but I hope if we can at least start, introduce a hybrid system, then because some children and some lecturers, they don't want to have this virtual teaching, especially during revision classes. So they say they want face-to-face classes. I mean, they want to see the children, and the children, they want to, when sometimes they are reluctant to ask questions online. Then the shock of COVID-19 crisis on education has been unprecedented. So then number one is, I just summary. Now this COVID, students were at home, not only the small children, even the university students, undergraduates. Then we have to provided them, the government and others, they provided with the necessary thing. Then we conducted the examinations. The next thing is financial support by the government and other institutions, and the training of teachers, lecturers, and finding material. Those are not easy. So anyway, we have to move forward for the establishment of a system, even not only during COVID time, even after COVID, we can, have continue with certain proposals. Then finally, I had to tell you, there are three things: relief, recovery, and rebuilding. Okay, so that's all I had to tell Honorable Turiraja, Justice Turiraja. So anyway, I have to thank the others as well, because I was invited to co-chair this inviting me to co-chair this session in Colloquium of the 6th Professor N.R. Madhava Menon South Asia Mooting Competition Law Students Conference and Colloquium today. So anyway, thank you very much for the judges, the organizers, the speakers, and all were there. And I was given an opportunity to be in the panel of the Moot program. So thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. That was really enlightening. And may I now request Justice Surai Raja to call upon Professor Balraj Chauhan, because Mr. Prashant Barua is not there, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I think it must be very cold in UK. He's due to pandemic, he's held up in UK, I was told. I think still he wouldn't have got up from the bed due to the cold weather. Okay, next we'll call Professor Dr. Balraj Chauhan, Vice Chancellor, DNLU, Jabalpur. Professor Balraj Chauhan, it's yours.
Thank you, Lordship. Honorable Chair, my fellow panelists, and dear participant, good afternoon to all of you. For me, it's a wonderful occasion, and for that I thank Mr. Manohar, Dr. Salim, Professor Shiva Kumar, they are my friends, to provide me this wonderful opportunity to be the part of this colloquium. Any event in the name of Professor Menon leaves its own impact and impressions. I'm happy that Professor Shiva Kumar is working hard with Millet, and this event has been organized by Millet in collaboration with the Lloyd Law College on the rights and liberties in pandemic, constitutional challenges, judicial responses in South Asian region. Madam Indra was very elaborate when she was talking about the Sri Lankan education system, and particularly about the legal education. I think we are all common, whether Dr. Manoj was speaking, because I know he's a very great scholar, good scholar. And what I'm going to communicate through this forum, that education is broadly recognized as a tool to promote peace, justice, and equality. In my country, and I hope that in most of the countries, It seeks to achieve an egalitarian society for the people. And this topic, right to education in pandemic, when I got a call from Professor Manohar, I got a communication through email. I thought, what I'm going to speak on it. I'm a student of law. I can speak on any doctrine. And as far as the data are concerned, they have never attracted me because there are three lies. One is white lie, another is black lie, and third is the statistics. So I'm not going to prove or disprove anything through data. But the only thing is, then I sat quietly with me. And I tried to find out what we are going to discuss there. And what will be my role as a student of law, as a vice chancellor of third university, what I have experienced. Because last 1 year has been very challenging for me as a vice chancellor throughout my career, because I was appointed vice chancellor first in 2006. Since then, till now, I think the trauma started in last February and March. In March, there was a total lockdown. Institutions were closed. And we were told that now you decide what you are going to do. We shifted from offline to online classes. And fortunately, we are a national law university. We could manage, infrastructure was there, we developed something. But really, I am telling you, educational rights, because we all are aware as a student of law that whether it is UDHR, international covenant, civil and political rights, or socio-economic and cultural rights, it has been recognized as a human right. And as far as Indian Constitution is concerned, I think Dr. Manoj was talking about them very elaborately. But whether rights provide the desired objective or goal or outcome for which we are talking. I thought that instead of right to education, we should have discussed duty to educate during the pandemics. How this duty has been performed by the states, how this duty has been performed by the nations. Because as a vice chancellor, when this challenge came before me, university is also a state. Under Article 12, you will agree with me. So I thought that what is my duty? My first duty was to create necessary infrastructure. Second duty was to find out whether my students are having the adequate facilities or not. Because this pandemic forced me to think about four things. Number one, availability of resources with the students. Number two, their accessibility. Number three, their adaptability and acceptability. I have created remote access for them. We have taken whether it is SCC, LexisNexis, EPW, you name the resource I made available to them. But are they using it? And the classes which we were running from 9:30 to 2:30, and then after that there were remedial classes, there were tutorials, project discussions. Are they? And then I remembered what Naini Palkiwala said. And I am in full agreement with Naini Palkiwala. Naini Palkiwala said, education is a technique of transmitting civilization. Madam Indraji, I am very much impressed the way you were talking about the legal education. And I hope that you will agree with me that if it is a technique of transmitting civilization, in order that it may transmit civilization, education has to perform two major functions. First, it must enlighten understanding which means capacity to think clearly and developing intellectual curiosity. This is the first challenge or requirement of the education. And secondly, it must enrich character, which means to develop moral leadership founded on courage, intellectual integrity, and sense of values. When I was planning how should I go ahead, I thought that in physical classes, I'm focusing on 4 things: core knowledge, contextual knowledge, skill development, and value inculcation. And I am fully aware, and I think my friends from Lloyd Law College or from India and abroad, they are aware that the Fox discovered that lectures presented by the teachers provide 4 basic conceptions of their roles, or you can say that how they are transferring information / knowledge to their students. And these 4 theories are transfer theory. Transfer theory means which targets knowledge as a commodity. In this transfer theory, it targets knowledge as a commodity to be transferred from one vessel to another. In shaping theory, based upon the objective of the molding students to a predetermined pattern. Traveling theory, where there are hills to climb for better viewpoint, with the teachers acting as an expert guide. And the growing theory, which focuses more attention on the intellectual and emotional development of the learners. Out of 4, good institutions are applying all the 4. Most of the institutions are only doing adopting first theory, that means transfer theory. They treat the knowledge as a commodity and they are transferring it from one vessel to another. For example, what we are doing during this pandemic, we are forwarding the videos, reading material, and 1 or 2 interactions because data problem is there, connectivity problem is there, technological glitches are there. And so just it is, and so many private, you see, institutions, even companies have emerged to transfer the knowledge from one vessel to another. Shaping theory, yes, most of the universities are having their own pre-designed curriculum. And we all say, Honorable Justice Thuraiya Raja, Justice from Sri Lankan High Court, Sri Lankan Supreme Court, beg me pardon, sir, Sri Lankan Supreme Court is sitting with us, and Lordship will agree. This process of transferring knowledge, does it enlightens the understanding of a particular student? Because until and unless he has not developed the intellectual integrity, it is possible only through rigorous exercises, pedagogical changes which are required in the curriculum. And I have worked, because believe me, for the last 8-9 months, I'm working. I agree with what our friend Dr. Manoj Kumar said, miles wide and inch deep. What knowledge we are giving? Miles wide, inch deep. We are just completing the syllabus. But knowledge-wise, of course, dear friend, I agree with you. It should be more deeper than wider. And for that, you will have to think differently. Because why I'm saying we have to think differently, because there are 4 learning theories: cognitive, intellectual, and of course, various learning styles developed by the students. Madam Indra, as a mother, you might be knowing, if you are having sons and daughters, all of them are having the different learning styles. How they are studying, you can watch them. You see the students in the hostel, how they are studying. Learning styles. Of course, in a physical classroom, it is very easy for a teacher to connect himself with the students, to connect a mentor with the students, and they are able to adopt a theory. It may be hill theory, it may be growing theory. Of course, they are transferring knowledge, and they are transferring that knowledge with the hope that it will be enlightened by that particular students. And that is the purpose of education. Until and unless intellectual curiosity has not been created, I think at higher level, because Dr. Manoj was asking us to discuss the new education policy. Friend, that is a different thing. New education policy we will discuss at an appropriate time, and I'm speaking about that. But presently the question is, we are in a storm. And it is said, when you are in a storm, expand your wings. Are we having the right wings to fly? Are we having a sufficient strength in our wings? Because we all know institutions like National Law University, IIT, IIM, here we are having competent teachers, and they are working very hard, and especially my female faculty. They are working now 24/7. When they are at university, they are doing university work. When they are at home, even then they are doing university work. And if it is lockdown, it is work from home, then they say, sir, functional university is better than the closed university, because we have to work. You were talking that pandemic has become a great leveler. Dr. Manoj, it could be said about those housewives who are not working, but ask working wives, what is their position? It has added more work to themselves. And that's why this particular, pandemic rights to education, of course, as a student of law, we feel elated, we feel proud that we are having the enough provisions, and we are happy that a lot of judicial decisions are there. But during pandemic, how the outcome should be judged, we have not created any scale. And the examinations what we have conducted, I don't know the experience of the Lloyd Law School, Dr. Salim or Professor Manohar Saab will tell us that I found that previously there were only 5 or 6% students who used to copy. We were trying to check them. But now, we are issuing notices to more than 30% students just to clarify how their answer is similar to that particular students. And you ask them, so where are moving from? Values, inculcation of values, skills. Open book examination, we are denying them to think. The best part of the education is to think and think and think and then reach to the solution. Meet the challenge. Lordship, I am taking more time. Please stop me if you want, because I know others are here also to speak. So I say that during the pandemic times, we can take or we can test all the methods of teaching. Trial and error, lecture methods, imitations, and we can force a student to think and think and think. For me, pandemic is a challenge. As a teacher, as an administrator, and it is that challenge which may be called as an act of God. And the only choice which is left to us is to prepare ourselves in such a way so that we are able to come out from this storm. We have to strengthen our wings. We have to infuse confidence in our students. We have to empower our faculty, and it can be done only through positive attitude. And we should try to move forward because everybody is stressed, whether it is government, whether it is executive officers, and the Lordship is sitting here, whether it is judiciary. So I wish you all the best. And I would like to say that try to give your best. Pandemic, when the history will be written, then we will be remembered the way we have fought against the pandemic. Thank you very much. Once again, I will thank the organizers for providing me this wonderful opportunity. I am thankful to Mr. Manohar, my friend, Professor Shiva Kumar, and I bow before Professor Menon because I'm his mentee. Whatever I am today, I'm only because of him. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. That was really an exhaustive one from your side, and it really added a new dimension to the ongoing discussion of the colloquium. So may I now request the chair to call upon Dr. Puneet.
Yeah, that's great. Professor Chauhan, it was very, very timely sharing of experience and thoughts with us. And I'm really happy. I wish that we had some more time to really virtually steal your knowledge. Thank you. Anyhow, the moderator will not allow me to go beyond that. Okay, let us call let us call Professor Dr. Lisa. Is it?
Sir, it's Dr. Puneet, sir. Dr. Puneet. Yes.
Okay, let us call Dr. Puneet, Associate Professor, Center for Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Puneet, it's your time.
Thank you very much, sir, and a very warm good morning to all of you. Honorable Mr. Justice S. Thurai Raja, keynote speaker Dr. Manoj Kumar, co-chairs Madam Indira Samarasinghe and Prashant Barua, Professor Balraj Chavan, my distinguished colleague Dr. Professor Lisa P. Locos, the other panelist Mr. Satya Prakash, and dear participants. It is absolutely a great honor to be here. Let me at the outset thank the organizers, particularly Professor Shivakumar, Mr. Manohar Tairani, Professor Lisa Lukos, Professor Salim, Dr. Akhilesh Khan, Mr. Ravi Prakash, and Dr. Madhukar Sharma for giving me this opportunity to be part of this colloquium organized in honor of Professor Menon. Let me begin by stating that nothing in living memory has devastated the human life on earth as badly as the COVID-19 did. It is perhaps one of the incontrovertible statements to make. COVID-19 pandemic, which has struck the humankind in an unprecedented way, has brought unprecedented challenges to all aspects of life. It is the biggest health crisis that has pushed the world into the deepest global recession in living memory. It has also caused the largest disruption of education in history. Its adverse impact on education at all levels, from preschool to universities, is near universal. According to the United Nations, by the mid-April 2020, 94% of learners worldwide were affected by the pandemic, representing 1.58 billion children and youth from pre-primary to higher education in about 200 countries. It is a matter of serious concern. At the outset, we must understand that education is not only a fundamental human right, it is an enabling right with direct impact on the realization of all other human rights. It is a global common good and a primary driver of progress across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a bedrock of just, equal, inclusive, and peaceful societies. When education system collapses, peace, prosperity, and productive societies cannot be sustained. As all of you know, the right to education is a fundamental right enshrined in Article 26 of the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Article 13 and 14 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. UDHR and ICSCR provide that primary education shall be compulsory and available free to all. On the other hand, secondary and higher education are not compulsory but shall be made generally available and accessible to all by every appropriate means. As with all economic, social and cultural rights, even the right to education is subject to progressive realization and the availability of state resources. Broadly speaking, right to education has a similar status under the Constitution of India as well. Article 41, which is part of the Directive Principles of State Policy, mandates that the state shall, within the limits of its economic capacity and development, make effective provision for securing the right to education. There are, of course, two significant exceptions where the state cannot take the excuse of lack of resources, as far as the Constitution of India is concerned. With the insertion of Article 21A, state has an obligation to provide free and compulsory education, primary education to all children, notwithstanding the limits of its economic capacity or development. Under Article 46, that's the second exception, the state has an obligation to promote with special care the educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the people. Unlike Article 41, if you have noticed, obligation under Article 46 has not been made subject to limits of economic capacity and development of the state. These are some of the important aspects that we must keep in mind when Professor Balraj Chavan spoke about the duty to educate and the state's duty to educate in particular. And I think apart from Article 21A, the state's duty to educate must be derived from Article 46 as well as from Article 41 of the Constitution of India. The constitution of many other countries also recognize the right to education in one form or the other. It is undoubtedly universally recognized as one of the basic human rights. But where we were even before the start of the pandemic, as far as securing right to education to all sections of the society are concerned, the UN report states that the world is already facing formidable challenges in fulfilling the promise of education as a basic human right even before the pandemic. As per the UN study, despite the near universal enrollment at early stage grades in most countries, an extraordinary number of children, more than 250 million, were out of school and nearly 800 million adults were illiterate. Moreover, even for those in schools, learning was far from guaranteed. Some 387 million, or 56% of primary school age children worldwide, were estimated to lack the basic reading skills. That is the state of education even before the pandemic. Even in India, if you look at, despite having fundamental right to free and compulsory primary education, we could not achieve 100% enrollments, though enrollment ratio has no doubt increased after right to education is recognized as a fundamental right. Dropouts at the secondary level are one of the big issues. As far as the higher education is concerned, enrollment is less than 25% in India. It's somewhere around 23%. And our new education policy is actually aiming at increasing it to 50%. Children and adults from the vulnerable sections are worst off as far as the access to education is concerned. There are many studies that prove it beyond doubt. This was the scenario before the pandemic has struck. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the pre-existing disparities in education. The Committee on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights identified in its general comments 4 interrelated components of the right to receive an education. That's 1, availability, 2, accessibility, 3, acceptability, and 4, adaptability. That's the general comments that was issued by the committee to the right to education. In the context of COVID-19 outbreak, the second and the fourth, the accessibility and adaptability components are of particular interest. COVID-19 has affected all levels of education and training. There is no doubt about it. As many as 40 million children worldwide have missed out on early childhood education in their critical preschool year. They thus missed stimulating and enriching environment, learning opportunities, social interaction, and in some cases, even adequate nutrition. This is likely to compromise their long-term healthy development, especially those children from the poor and disadvantaged families, particularly from the so-called developing countries. Similar is the case with children missing school education as well. UNESCO estimates that 23.8 million additional children and youth from pre-primary to tertiary may drop out or not have access to schools next year due to the pandemic's economic impact alone. The total number of children not returning to their education after the school closures is likely to be even greater. School closures make girls and young women more vulnerable to child marriage, early pregnancy, and gender-based violence, all of which decreases their likelihood of continuing their education. As far as technical education is concerned, technical and vocational education, training systems, vulnerabilities including low levels of digitization and long-standing structural weaknesses have been brought to light by this crisis. Disruptions in workplaces made it difficult to implement apprenticeship schemes and work-based learning modes, key elements of functional and market-responsive technical and vocational system. In the higher education subsector, while online learning has generally taken place through recorded lectures and online platforms, some universities have postponed learning and teaching until further notice due to the lack of information technology infrastructure for both students and teachers. It is true that in some universities like National Law Schools, which Professor Balraj Chavan spoke about, they have a better infrastructure, but that is not the case with all even public universities in India. And it is not just the universities, there are multiple colleges that are also offering education. They do not have the adequate technology to support online teaching, even if the institutions can somehow manage, as all of us know, in countries like ours, that not all people would have access to internet. And even like my own personal experience, if I am to speak of, sitting in the national capital of Delhi, I experienced call dropouts many a time. Yesterday, I was part of the some event and there was a call drop. The internet automatically gets disrupted and the entire process gets affected. It has happened many a times. And imagine people living in remote areas where access to internet is even more difficult. How do we ensure, even if the schools and institutions can have this backup to ensure that the classes are held on time, there is no guarantee that the students are able to receive it. And semesters and academic calendars of some programs have been successfully implemented online where others could not. There are multiple calendars that are in place in many universities now. In my own university, we have one calendar for the new batch and another academic calendar for the old batch. How do we synchronize them? It is very difficult. Will we be able to synchronize it by the next academic year? Nothing can be said about it with certainty because, again, keeping in view the rise of new cases in the country. So the education disruption, we can't enlist all the disruptions it has caused. If you look at it, what needs to be understood that it will have a ripple effect beyond education. I have already said it is the enabling right to education is an enabling right which would have implications on other aspects also. So we also need to keep in mind what kind of ripple effect the education disruption would have on other aspects of life too. When the pandemic struck, like all other countries, even India was clueless as to how to respond to this gigantic challenge. We had no plan in place as to what should be the coordinated response to it. Though we have, none of us have actually paid attention towards this particular law. We have a law called Disaster Management Act of 2005, which requires all ministries and departments to have a disaster management plan to respond to all kinds of disasters, whether natural or man-made. But concerned ministries and departments at both state and central level have actually had no plan in place to cope up with this gigantic challenge. If you look at what plan the Ministry of Education has had, because it was a 2005 legislation which required them to have a plan in place to respond to all kinds of disasters. And disruption of the education is not something that has happened only because of this COVID-19. It has happened at a global scale, large scale, no doubt about it. But there have been such similar disruptions happening elsewhere. So even education ministries and departments at the center and the state level, if we go by the provisions of the Disaster Management Act, were expected to have a plan in place as to how to respond to these kind of disasters. But unfortunately, we did not have had any such plans to respond to. Of course, I understand that this was unexpected, unforeseen. But if we had some plan in place to respond to some kind of disasters, probably we would have been better off in augmenting it and further expanding it to respond to this kind of gigantic challenges. But we had nothing in place. So everyone, as like, it is not just the case of India. I'm sure it is the case with all other underdeveloped countries that we were taken by surprise. We were clueless as to how to respond to it initially. So now that we have understood how do we respond to it, the policy brief of the United Nations Organization states that unless urgent necessary actions are taken, the learning crisis created by the pandemic might become a generational catastrophe. It is really shocking when I read about it that it might become a generational catastrophe. Urgent action thus needs to be taken. What is important to be noted is that the ability to respond to the challenges thrown up by the pandemic changes dramatically with the level of development. Each country have a different level of capabilities or limitations in how it can actually respond to these kind of gigantic challenges. Developing and underdeveloped countries in the SAARC region have a greater difficulties in coping with these challenges. That is the fact that we must actually acknowledge. Each country should undertake an exercise to understand the amount of disruption it has caused within their jurisdiction and devise appropriate measures. It is not just about education in one field. Education at all levels is affected. We need to take a comprehensive look at what exactly the amount of disruption it has caused and what kind of implications it would have on lives and careers of the children, as well as the ripple effect the education disruption has caused. We need to take all that into account, and the alarming projection of nearly about 28 million people not likely to return to the school. Each country should also look at what is that possibility in their respective jurisdiction and take appropriate measures. Countries should focus on issues relating to accessibility and adaptability. And accessibility has three overlapping dimensions. Non-discrimination, because vulnerable sections are worst off as far as access is concerned, particularly during this pandemic. Physical accessibility is the second thing, and economic accessibility is the third thing. When we say right to education, at some level, pre-primary level is a fundamental right, and even the higher education is also a state's obligation because of the directive principles of the state policy. What kind of measures the state should take to ensure this non-discrimination and physical accessibility as well as the economic accessibility. The education should be available to all without discrimination. This is something that is not negotiable, that is taken for granted, that's the duty of the state to ensure that. Affordable and, if necessary, accessible via modern technologies such as distance learning programs is what that needs to be ensured. In addition, adaptability entails that the state's education system should be flexible and countries should look into the ripple effect of education and try to address them holistically by having a proper policy or a plan in place. And it is in this context that each country should take into account the recommendations of the United Nations organizations that they made in their policy brief that was published on education during pandemic and beyond. They published it as early as in August 2020, and they made 4 broad recommendations as to what each country should need to do with response to this. Number 1, that's the best, of course, suppress transmission of the virus and plan thoroughly for school reopening. Even if you look at today, we have started the process of reopening, but it is not yet complete. And with the new wave of spread of coronavirus, probably we may have to, some states in some places have already started again, started closing the schools or announcing lockdowns for certain period. So we don't know whether we are going ahead or going back, because we are not at the top of this crisis. It is actually the crisis is actually growing despite the vaccine in place and all that. So what needs to be done is that they need to take steps to ensure that all schools and universities reopen. That can happen only after suppressing the transmission of the disease. So that should be the primary the focus. And unless it is done, the physical reopening is not a possibility. It is not even advisable. We should all be very careful about it. And the second recommendation that they made is protect education financing and coordinate for the impact. This health crisis, this gigantic health crisis, has also led to economic recession, economic crisis, as a result of which each country's resources are also constrained as to on what it can be actually devoted to spend. There is a likelihood that the allocation to educations might be reduced. And so if you look at the budgets, you would probably get an indication that it is already getting reduced, allocation to education. But now that if they want to rebuild it back and reopen the universities and ensure that all children actually get back to the schools, colleges, and universities, then the need is to, if not at least to increase the budget allocation for the education, is to at least protect the existing allocations for education and ensure that it is not further cut down. So there's a second important thing at a larger policy level that we need to concentrate on. And the third recommendation is build a resilient education system for equitable and sustainable development. Now that we have learned the biggest lesson of our lifetime, that we need to better prepare and build that resilient system and have proper policies and infrastructure in place as to how to respond to these kind of crises. This is not going to be a one-off event. If you look at some of the projections, they say that we are more likely to have these kind of issues even in future. We need to understand and then build the necessary infrastructure and a resilient system to address these kind of challenges in future. And the fourth recommendation is reimagine education and accelerate change in teaching and learning. That also needs to be done. Suddenly, of course, within few months, we could come up with something and started with online classes. We are never used to this kind of online conferences. Now, in the last 1 year, perhaps the number of online conferences that are held anywhere, are unprecedented than the previous physical conferences that were held. Personally speaking, I also get now maximum number of invites than before. There are so many events that are happening, but that's a different aspect of it. But we need to reimagine the entire education system and accelerate changes in teaching and learning to adapt to the new methods. And maybe we may have to train teachers. Some of them are not well trained to use this digital platforms for the purpose of holding classes, may not have access to internet and everything at a grassroots level, if you particularly think about that. So building that infrastructure is also should be part of reimagining the education for coping up with these kind of challenges that come in future. So this is where I end with my short presentation. And of course, I only thought of speaking about this broader issues than specific issues and education as far as specific streams are concerned, because unless these broader issues are looked at and taken care of, then there's no point in looking at the specific issues, is what I particularly feel. I once again thank everyone for giving me this opportunity. I look forward for any questions or comments at the end if we have any time left. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sir. So may I now request the chair to call upon Dr. Lisa P. Lucas?
Yes, it was very thought-provoking, Dr. Puni. Yeah, there are shortcomings, but there is one benefit, because at a given time that we are in many parts of the world attending many conferences, which we never did it in the previous years. Oh, that's one of the great things. Even though there are a lot of shortcomings, that is one of the benefits that we get now. Yes. But wish that we see you all present and just say hi to everybody. Anyhow, let us call Professor Dr. Lisa P. Lucas, who is a very known person in the Lloyd fraternity, and all the people were appreciating her work on the inauguration session. She is Professor, GGSIP University, National Administrator, India, South Asian Mooting Competition. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lordship, for your kind words. Respected Honorable Justice S. Raja, Dr. Manoj Kumar, Professor Dr. Indira P. Samarasinghe, Professor Dr. Baldal Chauhan, and my dear friend and Professor Dr. Puneet, Mr. Satya Prakash, and the other panelists, and dear audience. It's my pleasure to share some views of the difficulties and of course and as well as the benefits that the online education system offering us. And of course, I don't have some theoretical material with me. I will be speaking from my experience, because it was exactly on 18th March that my university decided that we will have a break for 15 minutes in order to maintain social distancing. So of course, that 15 days notice is still in force, I should say that, even after a year, though some part of it has been partially removed. So as a teacher, teaching in a state university, which accommodates students from all streams, we have a lot many scholarship wherein we accommodate economically backward students. Of course, there are many students, since it is an entrance-based system also, there are many students who are coming from very good backgrounds. So that's why I have told that from a diverse field, we have students, and many students we have from underprivileged areas, who are marginalized, who are poor, as the case may be. And since it is a government university and the government hostel facilities are they're available, there are many students even who have an eye on the admission in the state university, because you get hostels and all other facilities at a cheaper rate, because that itself is a threat for many good students, but who are economically weak and backward. So as a teacher, teaching in the undergraduate courses, postgraduate courses, and even as a teacher who is handling research scholars, again coming from this various background, I will be speaking out from my heart. And I will be also sharing my experience as a mother of 2 small kids who are remaining indoors for more than an year and completed successfully 1 academic year in their schools without seeing the school, without meeting their friends, and without meeting their teachers, completely remaining indoors. They could not even come out of the house, because of course it can be the over caring of the parents as well, because the threat of corona is everywhere, especially in a metropolitan state like Delhi, wherein people are very closely staying. So you don't want to take any risk and expose the children to any risk. So always you advise them to remain indoors. So when I look at the education during pandemic, dear friends, in my limited understanding about the Constitution of India, it does not have much provision exclusively dealing with the children and youth. From the existing provisions concerning children and youth, the most important article appearing to me in the Constitution is right to education, which is in directive principles of state policy, as well as a fundamental duty, now which has become a fundamental right. As we know, inclusivity is a crucial element of a sound education system, working in society wherein all stakeholders come together to work and create an environment promoting equity. Because sound education system is imperative for societal development, social, economic, and political. As everybody did here in this session, I also do appreciate the fact that in this digital age, one cannot afford to be ignorant of the technological advancement taking place, and online education system being one of many which has been of immense assistance during the pandemic. However, making online education a new normal, as highly advocated by many writers, needs to be tested on the touchstone of working ground of reality. And when I share my experience during the 1 year after engaging online classes, first I will share the issues faced by me as a faculty. the most important issue was the digital divide. Because when the pandemic began and when the lockdown started, I was in Kerala, a very remote village, a small village, wherein all people face the connectivity issues. And I don't have any shy to say that our village is too small, that every house is not having their own laptop or their own personal computers. Of course, a smartphone might be available in almost all the houses. So the non-availability of gadgets and internet services were one of the major constraints that many faculties face there. But since I belong to Delhi and I had a laptop of my own, of course, this difficulty was not there. But as far as internet service was concerned, it was such a big issue, because whenever I had a class, I had to travel to my sister's place in order to engage the class. So the places, even for the teachers who belong to the places which has got a weak internet penetration, the connectivity itself will be an issue for the teachers to handle the online classes continuously. And as I have told you, since the place itself is very what you call backward, and I was lucky to get a government job, but where there are many teachers who are working in affiliated colleges or private colleges and private schools, which is very meager salary. So even a financial constraints to afford a smart device or a good high-speed broadband services, etc., is a major constraint that we cannot ignore. So I remember during the March-April time, when I was in Kerala, considerable time I had to spend in asking to my students, am I audible? Am I visible? Is everything okay? And the next point is the loss of accessibility. So online teaching have reduced the physical touch, which everyone has said in this particular section, with a classroom teaching in conventional setup that offers to a teacher. So maintaining eye contact has its own beauty and it has its own benefit. And you can put question to a distracted student and you can catch the attention of the student immediately. And this, after understanding your nature, the students will be very careful, very attentive in the class, because they know that the moment their attention deviates, they will be caught by the teacher. So this facility is missed in online teaching because you cannot pressurize every student to switch on their camera throughout, because their excuses will be, we don't have a very good internet connection, so at least we can hear you, so let us turn off our camera. So you cannot pressurize a student to continuously switch on their camera, and this itself will create certain trouble in the mind of the teacher. Sometimes you even question your integrity as a teacher. Okay, you are delivering a class to a students of 100 students and you have no idea how many of them are there, because every time you have an hour, you have to teach for an hour, and if you take the name of the students every time to cross check whether he is actively participating or not, of course then you have to compromise your syllabus. So the problem of maintaining attendance in a classroom section, as online teaching methodology does not allow a teacher to keep a continuous surveillance of the attendance of the students. And of course, we have BCA guidelines, especially when I talk about legal education, which says that there should be minimum 75% of attendance to the students. So whatever the sheet that you receive, because you can see the name of the students, then it is taken for granted that yes, they have attended the lecture, whether they have actually attended it or not. So it becomes just something superfluous. Only you are creating documents without understanding whether the student had attended physically your classes and intellectually whether they have attended, whether they have clarified their doubt, whether they got a new concept. So only on the basis of login, you have to award them the attendance. Then I strongly believe that it has also diluted the quality education. Because what happened in a digital platform, of course, you will be more concentrating on what questions to the student, but active participation of the class is very much missing when the delivery becomes monologuous lecture. Because quality education demands active involvement of students into various classroom activities, like in the low classes, actually what we do is vibrant discussions, role plays, case studies, sometimes even dummy modes. All these things are to a certain extent will be missed in a digital environment. So when we say, and important Another important aspect is the clinical legal education. When the Bar Council of India's new policy also gives too much importance to clinical legal education. So to a certain extent, the students are missing meeting physically the clients who really need them, interacting with them, as I said, this even the socially backward classes, because usually it is the poor people who come, and students also actively engage in teaching the poor kids. After the classes, they go to schools, they teach the poor kids, they help the people to get the various policy measures, creating documents for the poor people to get the policy benefits, scheme benefits, and all these things are actually missing. So the clinical legal education and the societal involvement and the field work of the student is missing drastically during the online education. They have to be satisfied only with the bookish knowledge, and teacher has to only teach them the bookish knowledge, as if you are teaching them swimming without a water. Here I used to use that metaphor. And of course, evaluation is not everything, but of course there should be evaluation. For a teacher also it is important, for a student also it is important, and as an education institution also, the evaluation is very important. But the way many universities conduct evaluation process, I should say that it has become meaningless. Because for our undergraduate students, and as well as for postgraduate students, and even to a certain extent with respect to coursework of the PhD scholars, most of the teachers preferred a subjective type question, because they did not want to evaluate objective type questions which will be appearing on the screen, because they have to take a printout, or on the online they have to educate. If it is objective type, the answers automatically, the evaluation also will take place. What is the fun of asking to a student in which year the constitution was adopted, and which article talking about right to life? Of course, this is not an entrance examination for LLB. Here you have to test the knowledge, you have to test the application of the law into facts. So it's only when you will be testing them on the basis of problems, hypothetical problems, in objective way, you can assess actually how much you have helped them to understand the nitty-gritty of law, how much they can critically evaluate their situation. So the MCQs and other subjective type tricks that many universities use and many teachers prefer has actually degraded the entire evaluation process. And coming to the issues faced by the students, the digital divide again is the main point. I was remembering that I was called as an examiner for taking a LLB dissertation in some institute. So I had 40 students, and for 10 students, I had to take Viva over phone, because they were not having internet connectivity wherein they can appear on a VC and give me answer. So on phone, I had to call them. So one person told me, I am actually standing on the terrace, because it's only on terrace I get proper connection. So I am standing on terrace from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so now I am tired. So I was feeling so sad for the student. I told if I had any communication that you are waiting, because we have roll numbers and usually we go by the roll numbers. So if I had any information that you are waiting for the call, because students also do not have that much certainty when they will be called, so they will take extra precaution. So I was feeling bad for the kids who were standing on the terrace. And all of we might have read about a news which came from a UP village, that a father had to sit on the tree with a mobile, because 3 of his school going kids will get some connectivity, then the person climbs the tree. So the digital divide is something, a great issue in countries like India, wherein half of the population is suffering this particular problem. So the if it cannot overcome the socio-economic barriers, then the online education will always create problem. Whatever be the praise that the new education policy is, and the praise and importance the new education policy is giving to online education. So sometimes I have felt that even very good students, they are also losing some interest. They are not showing the same interest and vigor and enthusiasm with which they were attending the lectures earlier. So in the online education, it's very difficult for the teacher to sustain the interest of the student and motivate the student, though to a certain extent we do that. But even with respect to the cream of the class, the very best student of the class also, they have shared this experience that they lose their interest in the initial 1 or 2 classes. They are very good, but when the continuous screen time, they are losing their interest because of this. Of course, there is no need to say that it has got a toll on their health. Another issue that I would like to share with you is the non-conducive environment for studies. Because there are many students who prefer a hostel because they may not have a non-conducive environment for studies at home. So then at home, and especially during pandemic time, wherein the parents are also remaining indoors, siblings are also remaining indoors. So every house do not have the same conducive environment. So if you unluckily the family doesn't have a good environment, then the student is not happy to turn on the cameras. The student is sometimes cannot give answer because the student is not motivated, student is not encouraged, the student might not be having understanding parents, as the case may be. So it may be with respect to say 10 to 15% of the students, but this is also a fact that when they remain indoors, this thing also we have to we have to understand this particular aspect also. I just remember about a message which I received 2 days back from one of my final year students. So the student wrote me a message that, Madam, on March 18, we received a notice that the college will remain shut for 15 days. And after 1 year, I have become an alumni. So this is also true, very true with the LLM course students, wherein we have adopted the 1 year LLM courses. The students are about to complete their important post-graduation degree, which will qualify them to do many things, which have helped them to determine their profession and the career in their life. Without seeing the college, without physically seeing the teachers, they are getting even their post-graduation degree. So that's why I feel that it was a great loss to those students who could get admission, but they could not come to the campus. They could not come to meet their peers. They could not meet their teachers, but they are getting a degree. They have completed a course. They have chosen their profession. So Dr. Puneet has already stated about many recommendations. So I have a very few recommendations and one from the teacher's point of view, because some of my colleagues have requested me to put this point in front of this erudite gathering, because we have vice chancellors here, we have judges here, so you can consider this. There are some universities which said that these online conferences, they are not considering as a proper conference. Dr. Puneet was just sharing that he got a lot many opportunities. Yes, as far as an established professor is concerned, the opportunities to speak, opportunities to address, that matters, and we got that opportunity. But think about the patients who are new in the profession, who are the beginners. They are attending this not only to share their views and not only to get the views from others, but also for their career development, also for their professional development. The APA scores are very important in order to get points and in order to get promotions. So the universities, when they have taken a stand that your paper presentation in an online conference is not fetch any points, of course they are sad about it. And there are many universities which are yet to take a decision that whether the online conferences and will comply with their requirements of publication for the purpose of PhDs. So these are certain things wherein we need a clarity, and the university, I think universities should be very considerate and kind enough before finalizing their policies on these matters. And another, I would have mentioned it when I mentioned about the benefits. One important benefit which I forgot to mention is that though I said there are many problems that the teachers and students face, one benefit that I could experience during the moot, I tell you, because the moot is going on now, the final round is going on. Justice Surya Raja was there in our last final round. We are very grateful. So now partly that is going on. And what I could see in this is that earlier when we were receiving the foreign students, we used to receive from almost all SAARC countries. We could not give them the full financial assistance. The student had to contribute something from their side. Of course, it was the student whose family could sponsor them. They could come here. But now what we could see is the student who had the talent and who had the potentiality, irrespective of their financial constraints, they are able to participate. So if we see I am not taking the name of countries, but the really developing countries from the South Asian region, we got very good teams because they don't have any financial constraints. They could send the very best brains. So it was such a stimulating contribution that they could do, or very good deliberations. So it was very difficult as for the judges to determine. So this is, of course, a beauty of online course or online moot. So this benefit I could find this time, that earlier when they had a lot of visa issues, earlier they had financial issues, they could not make it physically to Lloyd and they could not participate. But since they do not have any of these constraints being online, they could participate. So it has both benefits and disadvantages. So to what extent the government can help the community, help the teachers, and help especially the poor students to overcome the digital divide? If to a certain extent they can do that, of course, there can be CSR, in the companies can take a responsibility to do something good to the students who belong to remote areas, etc., etc. Of course, then the situation may change. But I strongly believe that there should be physical classes. Online, there can be a hybrid situation. Once in a while, you may go for an online, but otherwise, if the physical classes cannot be compensated and compromised at all, it cannot be replaced at all, because it shapes your personality. You get the psychological even connect with the students. You are not only their teacher, you become their mentor. So sometimes even you have to play the role of a mother, role of a sister, role of a counselor, because as a multifaceted personality, you have to handle the youth, especially as a college teacher, because sometimes they come with broken heart. There are many issues wherein you need to help. Sometimes the parents cannot help in these issues. So if you do not have a physical contact, if you cannot come to your room and open up, it's going to create a lot of problem, not only intellectual problem, not only academic void, but it's going to create even psychological problem in their minds, because we have been playing all these roles and we have helped a lot of students, not only in shaping the personality, but also to giving hands to take them to the profession, etc. So I really pray and hope that the situation should overcome, and the government has to really come, if the situation persists, the government has to really come up with a certain measures wherein the grievances of the teachers can also be taken care of and grievances of the students can also be taken care of. With this, I would like to conclude my talk, and now I am open for any discussion or questions.
Okay, may I now request the chair to call upon Mr. Satya Prakash?
Yeah, thank you. I was expecting the same feelings from Professor Dr. Lucas, because I know she is mother. I repeat the word mother as a teacher also, because I met a couple of the trainees last year, because you were not the teacher to them, you were a mother to them, you are so fond of them, and they really admire you. Thank you very much. In fact, I recall what the Dr. Manoj Kumar said. It's, are we going to learn swimming via online? That's the problem we are going to have now. That is inch depth and mile long. That's getting a bit tougher, and but there is some good things also. There are many participants can come without much expenses. That's a very good thing that which we learn, but not all the majority things are good on pandemic time. Let us have next, I have the privilege of calling the legal editor of the Tribune, Mr. Satya Prakash. Mr. Prakash, the floor is open.
Thank you. Well, Honorable Chair, Mr. Justice S. Thurai Raja, Dr. Manoj Kumar, Professor Indira, Professor Balram Chauhan, Vice Chancellor, Jabalpur DNLU, Mr. Professor P. Puneet, and Professor Lija Locus, who made a very spirited presentation. Professor Madhukar Sharma, I'm really delighted to be here in this August gathering, and it's an international audience also it has. The kind of discussions we have had so far, it's really heartening to note that we are discussing such an important issue in such a time when the entire world is facing a global crisis. Particularly, Professor Puneet has brought out so many aspects of this pandemic and its impact on education. And I suppose he was referring to the United Nations document that is about education during COVID-19 and beyond. I'm sure it was that document, and many of us have referred to that document. This aspect of impact of pandemic on the education or right to education during the pandemic, I would try to divide it into 2-3 portions, parts. One is about the way various stakeholders have tried to handle it. I mean, various stakeholders means the students, their parents, the educational institutions, the regulatory bodies, the governments, various aspects, because the nature of pandemic was such, the scale was such, the impact was such that it was beyond the capacity of any one stakeholder to handle it. So be it students, their parents, educational institutions, or regulatory bodies like maybe UGC, CBSE, and others, it was always needed a coordinated and concerted effort. As Mr. Professor Puneeth has pointed out, there was in various aspects, the government, the response, the kind of we expected, particularly under the Disaster Management Act, there was no response under that act. In fact, there was a PIL file in the Supreme Court which pointed out that there is no response from the government as envisaged under the act. But then when there is a disaster of this scale and nature, when entire world has come to a standstill, it's very difficult to expect, or rather we can expect, but it's very difficult for governments to come out with such detailed response, particularly because to start with, when the lockdown was announced, nobody thought that it will go on and every month the lockdown would be extended. The government initially was not knowing what to do and how to do. And that we have seen how the things were handled in the initial months, including the lockdown and the migrant crisis, all such things. But since we are concerned with education, there are certain issues which overlap. Migrant crisis or other issues also, because migrant population, they also had children, and we have seen children walking on foot on various parts of the country, in various parts of the country. What was needed was that the governments, they should have in a way tried to fathom the impact of the crisis and how it's going to unfold. Unfortunately, even the United Nations, particularly WHO, did not have very detailed kind of guidelines for that. WHO, in many discussions, it has come out that WHO faltered. And that was one of the reasons why many governments could not articulate their response so far as this pandemic is concerned. Education part, almost all the educational institutions were closed beginning by the middle of March or towards the end of March. In fact, the lockdown was announced in the 4th week of March, and thereafter all the educational institutions were shut. It brought out certain important aspects. One was the digital divide in this country, and not just in this country, in other parts of the world also. There were people who had access to internet. There were people who has access to internet via broadband or mobile internet. They could connect to the rest of the world. They could connect to their educational institutions. There were institutions which had this kind of infrastructure, and there were others which did not have. So this also brought out the divide between urban and rural populations. Mostly the urban population had this kind of accessibility to both this technology and other infrastructure where they could connect to their students. But rural parts of this country, people and the institution, educational institutions, particularly schools, they did not have this kind of infrastructure, and it was very difficult for them to connect with students and conduct online classes when they were allowed. It also brought out the divide between rich and poor, because there is a cost involved so far as acquiring technology is concerned. Even if one buys a laptop or a smartphone and with internet connection, it involves initial cost of accessing that technology. So this brought out digital divide, this brought out urban-rural divide, this brought out rich-poor divide in a country which is already divided, and where the gap between rural and urban population, the gap between the rich and poor was already quite wide. It highlighted this kind of divide and exposed it to the extent, to a greater extent. But then the way we say it, every cloud has a silver lining. The best part was that many of the institutions, the private or the government institutions, they tried to pool in their resources, and then the response, it was a bit delayed, but then even the regulatory bodies, particularly the BCI, took the lead in allowing online classes, and immediately everything was organized. I have my own experience because apart from being a journalist, I'm also visiting faculty and adjunct faculty to some law schools and some journalism schools. So the institutions, they took their own time, and it took sometimes in some cases it was a week's time. Sometimes in some cases they took almost a month in organizing such classes, online classes, and thereafter it became normal. Professor Lisa has brought out the problems faced by students and teachers. In fact, I'm never used to taking online classes. In fact, I hate online classes because you can't even see the students. And the kind of energy you require to conduct the class, sitting idle in a chair, it becomes very difficult to communicate with the students, to put in that kind of energy. So because online classes would always be somehow restrained. But the pandemic brought such kind of situation where it was impossible to go to colleges. In fact, the entire world was shut. Some of the aspects which we need to think about, and even after this, even after 1 year, many of the colleges are still shut. Schools have not been opened. In some parts, it's starting to reopen. And because of the new wave of pandemic in some parts of this country, the governments and the educational institutions, they are still very circumspect in reopening the colleges and institutions. But what can be done at this stage, that maybe next couple of months they will try to experiment it, but I suspect by after summer vacation all the colleges and schools are going to open. It's very important to open the schools and colleges, because as has been pointed out, it is not just a question of education, it's also a question of psychological impact of this kind of lockdown and this kind of keeping students from away from their peer group and educational institutions. I have, in fact, at my home, my daughter started crying one particular evening because she was not allowed to go to the park. And having remained in the house for almost 5-6 months, she was psychologically, she was devastated. So what we did was, we took out every night her bicycle, and we went out, and she used to ride the bicycle within the society complex. And then this is how we need to handle students. The psychological crisis is much more serious, particularly among school students who miss their peer group, who cannot even interact freely with their teachers because online classes, they have their own constraint. But having said that, this online classes should become normal, in the sense that supposing we have 5-day classes, at least one particular day should be online class. Why? Because suppose this kind of crisis hits us again, then the entire system or entire infrastructure that we have tried to build during this pandemic, this should remain in place, and this should be functional, so that any crisis, the moment it hits, we are in a position to work it out properly, and the system is not completely disrupted, because we already have this experience of disruption, and we need to keep this system which we have built in the last 1 year. This system must remain functional. Then a couple of points for our regulatory bodies, particularly the UGC and AICT and CBSE. Their response to the entire crisis has been a bit delayed, and the kind of response they gave, it led to litigation. in many cases, various high courts had to deal with cases. Then matter went to the Supreme Court, and finally, even for result declaration, the Supreme Court had to give a verdict, and thereafter result declaration happened. It also happened in a CBSE case of compartmental examinations. So the regulatory bodies should be much more focused so far as this particular these kind of pandemics are concerned, and they should have in place ready-made regulations for such situations. Because as I suggested regarding the online classes and the infrastructure that all the institutions and government or private or individual students and their parents they have built, that infrastructure must remain functional. So my suggestion is that each institution can designate a particular day when the classes shall be online. And this way, it will also give flexibility to teachers that they can conduct classes from home. And students also, they have much more flexibility. But the most important point is that in case there is a crisis which hits us again, in that case, we will be in a position to deal with that crisis, and there will be no disruption in classes. Similarly, I'm saying the regulatory bodies should not wait for another crisis to hit. They should have the emergency regulations already in place, so that if there is a situation, they can deal with that. One of the silver linings of this entire crisis has been the digital divide that we have talked about, that has got breached, in the sense that already the government has many programs for internet penetration and all, and they're trying to build take everything to villages. But the important part is that during this pandemic and in the last 1 year, the internet penetration in India has gone up to 55%. And across the globe, we are at number 2. China is 1, where it's almost 75%. The US, it's somewhere in mid-90s, 95, 96%. But in India, it has gone up drastically in the last 1 year, and we have reached 55% internet penetration. Important thing is that this penetration must further go, and each student should be in a position to connect to their class with the help of a smartphone or a laptop. I don't know how the governments can provide such facilities to each student, but at least the schools can have this kind of infrastructure. So next, Professor Puneet has pointed out that education budget is going to take a hit, and I'm sure it's going to happen almost across the globe, because the focus and the allocation has shifted to health, and that should remain the focus until this crisis is over. But then thereafter, building infrastructure, or particularly bridging the gap, this digital device is important. And this crisis has highlighted the importance of technology in delivering education to the targeted groups. It could be urban or rural, or rich or poor. Technology is important for every segment of the society, and it is something which is required across the globe, and irrespective of whether a particular country is developed or developing or underdeveloped. Each country, and in this, the international organizations, the governments, the NGOs, and even United Nations organizations, they have a role to play, how to bridge this digital divide, which has been highlighted by this pandemic. The best part is that now various organizations, they are trying to work on this, government or otherwise, they are trying to work on this. Some of us have talked about the Right to Education Act, and how it has panned out during the pandemic, and whether we have been able to implement the Right to Education Act, which puts an obligation on the state to provide right to education to children between the age group of 6 and 14. Right to education has been a very, very unlucky kind of law in India, because it has taken so much time. Way back in 1993, in Unni Krishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh, the Supreme Court declared Right to Education Act to be a fundamental right. But then it happened in 1993. So since 1993, nothing had happened except forming some committees, and getting recommendations. It could be added to the constitution only in the year 2002 by 86th constitutional amendment. But then even after that, the law, it was not that automatically it was to be implemented. Article 21 capital A, which was added to the education to the constitution, it required a law to be enacted for implementing this right, or realizing this right. And that law, it took further several years. In 2009 only this law could be passed, and in April 2010 this law came into force. But thereafter there are various aspects of this law which still remains to be implemented, and even the implementation part, it depends upon various states, and whether some involvement of NGOs is there or not. So various aspects. One of the aspects is that some sections have been left out. In fact, minority religious schools, they have been somehow, by definitions, they have been kept out of RTE. And some of the aspects is about the training of teachers. So that is not directly related to the pandemic, but the Right to Education Act has been unlucky act, in the sense that right to education was declared to be a fundamental right in 1993, added to the constitution as fundamental right in 2002. Then the law, Right to Education Act, it took further 7 years. In 2009 it became a law, and 2010 it was rolled out. So if you talk about the law, right to education becoming a fundamental right, it happened in 1993, and then it actually got implemented in 2010. So there was a huge gap. Some of the takeaways from this crisis, as one, I have already said that the digital device is getting bridged by default because it's becoming a necessity. The teachers also had to learn a lot during this entire process. I had to learn, at least, because not everybody was used to taking online classes, preparing PowerPoints and doing all sorts of things. But and then the online assignments and all such things, it takes time, and not everybody is well versed in technology. So it was also a learning process for many of us who are used to teach in various colleges or schools. So this has highlighted the role of technology in society. And modern societies are becoming much more complex. It's not just about books. So books also you have in your laptop, or everything you have in your laptop. Earlier this month I was traveling and I took my classes from somewhere else, and it was so easy to take classes and connect with the students, and it was as normal as I was taking classes from Delhi. So it's important to realize the importance of technology, and how technology can be used for a targeted audience like college students, school students, and then how to use technology as a facilitator. Technology at times it becomes a sort of handicap, in the sense that if we are not able to handle technology properly, technology cannot help us. One of the points, Professor, one of the points that was brought out was regarding how students, they don't take that kind of interest in online classes. It's very important for us as educators to use certain techniques to keep the students engaged. One of the techniques I use, like every 5-10 minutes you ask questions, specific students. So and so, can you answer this? Because it is happening that many students would log in and then vanish. So students are students, and we cannot blame them. Sometimes there could be some genuine work or something, but then to keep the students engaged, so all the time we need to converse them, we need to ask them questions, we need to encourage them to ask questions, and this is how we can try to overcome. But online classes can never be a sort of replacement for offline classes. classroom is very, very important. Eye contact is important. When Professor Chauhan talked about transmitting the knowledge and various techniques. Knowledge transmission, it's like sometimes on online classes, I often say, on my side, the transmission is on. From your side, the reception should be clear. So whether students are receiving what we are transmitting in online classes, it's slightly difficult because many of the students may be simultaneously doing something else, and we cannot blame the students entirely for that. But then there are constraints involved, and but then in crisis times, this is the best thing available. So we have tried to use that. The points that I would like to recommend is, one is, I have already said that online infrastructure that has been built by educational institutions and individual students and parents, that must remain intact and operational. So for that, the suggestion is that every week there should be, at least, if not the entire day, at least 1 or 2 classes which should be online, so that the system is kept operational. Second is that the regulatory bodies like UGC, CBSE, and other such bodies, AICT, they must have in place a particular set of regulations to deal with emergencies like this COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sure the government is trying to work very hard for internet penetration. They are laying optical fiber, and that will go, but that takes time, and government alone cannot do everything. There are private educational institutions, there are government educational institutions. Apart from that, there are NGOs, there are UN bodies. The final suggestion I would like to make, that once this crisis is over, each segment of the educational sector, I'm talking about in terms of pre-primary, primary, secondary, and maybe college education, higher education and all. If for each segment, there should be a study conducted. For urban and rural also, for metropolitan cities, that will give us the clear picture of the kind of impact this crisis had on the entire education sector. Without having done that kind of detailed study, and I'm sure the UN bodies will take interest in that, and even the governments, various departments, be it central government and state governments, and the civil society organizations, they would undertake this. And this is very important to understand its impact, and if at all it had adverse impact, and I'm sure it must had, it had. So what kind of adverse impact it had on us, and how that impact can be addressed in short term, medium term, and long term. And this kind of study will give us this certain data and certain other information to formulate our policy to deal with the adverse impacts of this crisis on the entire education sector. With this, I end my case, and I'm thankful to this Lloyd College and Professor Madhukar Sharma for having given me this opportunity to address, to be part of this gathering, where I got to learn so many things from judges, vice chancellor, various professors, and other people related to the education field. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I would now like to request the chair to start the technical session, and we are having presenters, and 2 presenters are there, who are Miss MPC Vijay Surya and Miss Sharing Shoden. And I would like to ask the presenters to just be brief in 8 minutes. You are having the time limit of 8 minutes. So, Chair, can you please invite, if you may please invite the first presenter.
Thank you. It was very nice. I should say thank you to Mr. Satya Prakash. It was very well presented, I might say. The reason is because you had the experience and you had your own feelings on the subject. That was really makes it more important here. I wish that we come in more, but unfortunately we have no time. I think ABSA not going to allow us to take any more time. before we invite the participants, the paper presentations, wish you all the best. And thank you very much for all the presenters. And the presenters, as Aftab Sir informed, you have 7 to 8 minutes the time. We know it's a very hard work that you are put in, and unfortunately the time limitation is very, very short. So you have to make your presentation within that time. Please try to stick on to the time. Any participants, if you have the questions, on your right hand side that you have the participants list, and please click it and post your questions, any clarifications to Aftab Absar. Am I correct, Absar? Do I pronounce your name correct?
Yes. Yes,
So please
correct.
post your question to Mr. Absar. He will post the question to the participants, because otherwise I think there will be administrative problems will be there, the connectivity and the administrative. So the question to be put to Aftab, and he will post the question to the participants. So you can make a free submissions, and once it's over, please wait. Absar will put you the questions, and you can answer the questions at the time. And the people who are putting the questions, please write your name and your designation if there is anything you wish to inform. Thank you very much. May I invite now Miss, I think it's a very privilege to call one of my sister in my own country, Miss MPC Vijaysurya, lecturer at Sri John Kotalawala University, Defense University. That's only one defense university we have in the country. Now the floor is open to Miss Vijaysurya. Miss Vijaysurya, all the best. Aftab, can you connect it?
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay.
Okay, now it is audible, right?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Justice Raja, for the kind invitation to do the presentation in this online platform. And I will stick into the area that this session is limited, that is the educational rights, and I will do my presentation purely on the educational rights during this pandemic in Sri Lanka. So first of all, I would like to give a brief introduction about the right to education in Sri Lanka. The right to education is not guaranteed under as a fundamental right in Sri Lanka. However, it has been identified as a directive principle of state policy and fundamental duties under the Constitution, as the state should complete eradication of illiteracy and thus assurance to all persons of the right to universal and equal access to the education at all levels. So that is how identified the right to education in Sri Lanka under the Constitution. Apart from the directives in the Constitution, we can also be take this right to education under the right to equality, which is guaranteed under the Fundamental Rights chapter in the Constitution of Sri Lanka. So under the right to equality, we can elaborate that all persons are equal before the law and are entitled to the equal protection of the law. So under that, we can say that all the children in Sri Lanka has the right to have a education in Sri Lanka. So, and I would like to give a brief introduction about how our education system developed from the British colonial system to up until now. So first of all, this systematic educational process was constructed or introduced by the British government into Sri Lanka by establishing their Catholic schools or Anglican schools inside the country. Before that, most of the education has been given by the religious monks in Sri Lanka to certain level of people, citizens in Sri Lanka. So after the British established these Anglican schools, there were some Catholic schools introduced by the Portuguese and the Dutch rulers in Sri Lanka as well. However, in 1947, the Education Minister C.W.W. Kanangara sir has changed the whole education system in Sri Lanka. That is the turning point actually in Sri Lanka, where this education made free to all people in Sri Lanka, from kindergarten to university. And 1961, the government take over of denominational schools to establish a national system of education, and 1972 attempt to make secondary education content more applied by adding mandatory pre-vocational courses at the junior secondary level. And in 1981, reform proposals to decentralize educational administrations and create cluster schools to pool resource poor schools with the school with more resources. In 1985, establishment of National Institution of Education, and in 1986, establishment of National Colleges of Education. 1987, devolution of powers to provincial council to control the education at the provinces. And 1991, establishment of National Education Commission for teacher training. And 1997 reforms included a four-pronged strategy to modernize curricula and textbooks, teaching methodology, distribute funds to improve school facilities, and provide management training to school principals. 1998, its enactment of compulsory education regulations. And 2006, education sector development framework and programs, which is funded by the United Nations to improve flexibility in internal management, enhance transparency, and prioritize communal needs, and increase efficiency in the utilization of school resources. So that is the history of development of the education in Sri Lanka. And this education is like controlling by the Ministry of Education for the schools, and the schools for bodies praised, and teacher training colleges and colleges for education, and the Department of Examination to control and the conduct national examinations and everything, and Ministry of Higher Education for the higher education in Sri Lanka, including universities as well. And then Ministry of Educational Services, they have to supply all the physical facilities and the educational facilities required by the education. And Ministry of Skills Development and the Vocational Training Center is there for the vocational education and the technical colleges in Sri Lanka. So that is the structure in Sri Lanka. So in Sri Lanka, in the purview of education, it is well provided by the state to all levels of children in Sri Lanka. So the education is there, but however, when it comes to the situation like the pandemic now we face today, there are some barriers to children who are getting the education from these online platforms. That is the only barrier now we're facing, because as most of the speakers elaborated in this session, that there are many shortcomings in the internet facility in Sri Lanka, because most of the students doesn't have a proper device to log on to the online classes and to have their sessions from the teachers. So that is the barrier that in a pandemic situation like today, that the students are facing. And as a teacher, I'm also conducting online classes from March last year. it is like first at the initial level, it is very difficult to adapt us as well to do these online classes, because sometimes we feel like we just like speaking onto us into a screen. Nobody is responding, nobody is replying. If even though we ask a question, nobody is going to give an answer to us. So it's a very difficult task to teachers as well, when in the aspect of conducting lectures in online platforms. It is also
Mr. Jesuriya, I'm sorry, the administrator is virtually killing me. Raising his hand and say that your time is up. I can give you only 1 minute more.
Okay, so in my conclusion, I would like to say this online teaching is very unproductive and impractical, because it is I don't know how the students are getting, and they are getting the essence of teaching via these online platforms. And the other thing is now this is 1 year that we are conducting these online sessions to all the levels of students. So the government should introduce a systematical approach to conduct this online session by training the teachers as well as the students as well. So, and however, there is an advantage of this online session, because it's a one thing that all the nation get together like today, that we are disseminating our knowledge in different platforms. That is only the advantage that we experience through online teaching. But however, as an overall aspect, it is unproductive and impractical way of teaching, and it is not good for the children, the cognitive development of children. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Vijayasuriya, because we have to stick to the time. Because the valedictory session is at 1:45. So we are compelled to finish it. And there is a question from the participant. May I request Mr. Abzar to refer the question to you as a message. So if we have some time, you can answer that question. We will see it. Or the question can be even go on a public post, Abzar. What
yes,
happens?
Yes, sir.
Everybody can
Yes.
So we'll have that public question. That is one. May I invite Miss Sherin Shodan? I hope that I pronounce it.
Yes, sir.
Correctly, ma'am. If I'm not pronounced it, I'm sorry. Since I give 9 minutes more, say that you have time till 13:25. That is 1:25. Floor is yours, Vishnu.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Chair, respected dignitaries, participants. I'm Shirin Chodan from Sikkim Government Law College. And the title of my paper is Right to Education During Pandemic, the Constitutional Challenges and Judicial Response. And this is with special reference to India. My paper focuses on the responses to the challenges that the pandemic has brought about with regard to the implementation and safeguard of the right to education, and also the role that the judiciary has played in ensuring. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible, ma'am. Kindly continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Also, the role that the judiciary has played in ensuring the same, and the paper also seeks to discuss on the questions that arises as to whether the constitutional safeguards and the legislations on the right to education deals with the unforeseen situation which has been caused by the pandemic. When I'm talking about the impact, the COVID-19 pandemic has battered the education systems around the world. It has affected about 90% of the world's student population. And I'm speaking out of a survey, the International Association for Evaluation of Educational Achievements, that is IEA, and the UNESCO has, together with the European Commission, launched a landmark study which was titled Responses to Educational Disruption Survey, REDS or REDS. And according to that, 90% of all learners were affected by the school, and we have all seen it as well. Closures caused by the COVID-19 at the peak of the disruption. The annual status of the education report that the ASER also found that 5.5% of rural children had not been enrolled for the year 2020. So this adds to the 6 million children who were already out of the school prior to COVID-19. So when I'm talking about the general response that the SAARC country has made, the Prime Minister, the Indian Prime Minister, we all saw he urged in Twitter and called all the SAARC heads to meet in a video conference to address the crisis. And we saw that the existing funds, that is the SAARC Development Fund, the Disaster Management Fund, this was also activated for the coordinated response. We saw an unprecedented crisis, and we also saw that the government declared a countrywide lockdown of all educational institutions on 16th of March 2020. The significance of education and its safeguard has always been a part of the Indian Constitution, and we all know that since 1950, the compulsory education was already incorporated in the directive principles of the state policy. The 86th Amendment, which added 21A, and thereafter in 2009, the Parliament also took another step to fortify this right by enacting the Act. And we also have the National Commission, which is protecting the right of the child. Having said this, to prevent the spread of the coronavirus and to take the initiative, the government declared a lockdown on all educational institutions. And then we saw the digital initiatives come into picture. Digital initiatives we saw in India, portals like Diksha, Eat Pathshala, Swayam, all these portals came about, which were in fact giving out learning contents, lessons, worksheets to the students. And if we talk about the policy, National Education Policy of 2020 also highlights some new things compared to the previous policies, like it has urged the higher education institutions to undertake research in the areas of diseases, scientific technology, vaccinology, etc. And the new policy also now says that the new circumstances and realities require new measures like the digital platform, the ICT-based educational initiatives. So these are all the policies that has been given. Further, one more point is talks about eliminating the digital divide. That when we are devising, let's say, a solution for the current problem, we also have to recognize that the benefits of online education cannot be leveraged until the digital divide is eliminated. And finally, another point that the policy makes is, like the former honorable speaker also pointed out, the teacher training. Most of the teachers are not conversant with the ICT methods of teaching, and they need to be trained as well. Although the new education policy is very far-sighted and it is giving out strategies and guidelines, but the challenges are equally daunting. If I have to talk about education in general, the UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Report shows that even before the crisis, only 5 countries demonstrated a strong commitment to equity in education through their financing mechanisms. So there's very little evidence of strong equity angle in response to the pandemic. Finally, if I have to talk about the judicial response, with regard to the judicial response, the right to education during pandemic, judiciary has been very clear and very vocal about the right to education being fundamental and also being incorporated in Article 21 of the Constitution, right from, we all know, Mohini Jain and Unnikrishnan case. But one thing that strikes me, even before the context of ensuring right to education during pandemic, even before this pandemic, is if we have to talk of right to education in this pandemic, we are talking in context of, let's say, right to be able to exercise this right. let's say, to be able to go to school with security and safety. And one thing has to be appreciated, that even before this, before the crisis, the Supreme Court has highlighted that the right to, I will quote, the right that there is a fundamental right to receive education free from fear of security and safety, and where the state is obligated to ensure the minimum safety standards in school. So here is a little, let's say, safety guideline or direction from the Supreme Court before the onset of the crisis as well. If I have to talk about the current pandemic in Avinash Mehrotra versus Union of India, the Supreme Court has decided that there is a fundamental right to receive, this was the case that I mentioned right now. With regard to the crisis that we are facing, the court on its own motion versus State of Bihar has been a little vocal with regard to right of education during pandemic. And I quote on I'll quote a judgment on a perusal of the steps taken across the world to ensure continued education during pandemic. We find that the most common way of providing education has been through remote learning. So, however, access to these technologies is low and limited in middle-income countries. So, the Supreme Court has also firstly agreed and recognized that the continued education during the pandemic, we can do so through remote learning. However, what reflects in the society reflects in our education system as well. So the access to it is another hindrance, or we can say another problem that has to be tackled. And when we are talking about remote learning techniques, the further guidelines has been issued in this particular elaborate judgment, that where the role of different NGO workers, Anganwadi also has to be played by, with regard to dispersing, continuing education via remote learning, installing community level television sets. When we are talking about internet connectivity in a place like Sikkim, where I am here right now in India, a very remote part, connectivity is an issue. So I see that, television sets are being distributed by the state government, so that, a little solution, a little, strategy that, at least a connection, at least a television, the lessons can be telecast on the television. So another question that comes out is as to whether the economically weaker sections could attend the classes, if you are talking about the video conferencing or online classes, and also if they don't have the means to do so, whether that could be a facet of 21A. That means whether the online education is also a facet of right to education. So here I would like to point out a case, Justice for All versus Government of NCT of Delhi. It has been held that although it is a High Court judgment, but it has been very elaborate in interpreting the education in right to education, and it has held that the court can apply an updating construction and dynamically, it has to dynamically interpret the provisions of RTE Act at this point of time. The word education is a broad term and is of a wide import, and it must be given the widest amplitude, especially when it has been left undefined by the parliament at this time of crisis. It is presumed that it has to be presumed that the parliament intends the court to apply construction that allows changes amongst other technological and scientific developments. And finally, I'm coming to the conclusion. I would like to conclude by saying that the term education is required to be interpreted dynamically according to the needs of the society. At the same time, when the world has switched to remote education, we must also realize that the use of digital media for digital learning process is also at an evolving stage. Online learning requires active engagement strategies, and it is not just limited to uploading and delivering content over digital devices. It is fundamentally different concept, and it is still at an experimental stage. Without face-to-face interaction, gathering and retaining the attention of the students for a prolonged time, and ensuring that the imparted education is understood effectively by each of the attendee in a virtual classroom becomes a demanding task. A little suggestion also, which is also given by the MHRD's Pragyata guidelines for digital education, while listing out the advantages and disadvantages of digital online education, it recognizes that this format cannot replace the classroom learning. The students' learning enhancement guidelines prepared by NCERT also note that the alternative modes of education have its limitations. The government should involve educational and technological experts in the field to review this this emerging mode of education, having regard to the ground reality, so that the robust online digital education system is also developed. And finally, I would like to end with the note given by Director General of UNESCO, Audrey Azoulay. We need an adequately financed recovery package to reopen schools safely, targeting those most in the need and setting education back on track for the COVID-19 generation. Every country should prioritize education, a global common good in the recovery. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, that was very thought-provoking submission, Ms. Shodan. It was very lovely. Wish that we had some more time to discuss the matters that you have raised. It's not only uncommon to Sikkim, even it is common to Sri Lanka in many parts. What happens is the lack of technical supports. I think the authorities in many parts of the world, especially our part of the world, are more interested in giving televisions and the television shows rather than the wireless connections and the data free. Of course, Sri Lanka has an issue, unlike in other part of this world, because we have limited data provisions because you have to buy the data. When you buy data, it's too expensive. I don't think the day earners or the low income group can afford to do that. That's the greatest setback in our education, that is online education, because they can't afford to do that. They can't afford to buy that data packages. So they have to forego at many times. And there are times, as Lucas said, it's not only in Kerala, you have to climb a tree or you have to climb many trees to get a signal. That is, it's little available in our country also, because we saw a news, with all due respect to all the party. A girl has to walk 6 kilometers to a place where she can get a signal for her phone. And when it was questioned, the suppliers or the providers said, sorry, you have an old phone and you should buy a new phone. And which she said that I can't afford to even buy data for this phone. How can I buy an old phone? How can I buy a new smartphone? So that is a serious problem we have now. I think the authorities concerned may be little, I might say, put the word merciful, to provide the more essential to the students rather than providing these teledramas and the advertising items through the televisions. Okay, having that, thank you very much, Ms. Shodan and Ms. Vijayasuriya. I think I allowed you 2 minutes more because the other two presenters were not raised their hands. So they said, Ansa said that, okay, you can go ahead. Now I may have the privilege of calling my dear and near sister who is working close to just almost about one building away from me. That is Ms. Indra Samarasinghe, to make the concluding remarks. Ms. Samarasinghe, its floor is for yours.
Before that, shall I make a small comment? Just
please, Professor Sivakumar, I didn't know
yes,
that you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you for giving an opportunity. Because this testing suggested about the telecasting to television and giving the data this one. I don't know, I have analyzed the situation in different capacities during pandemic. I found in Kerala, in my home state, they are having a victory channel. These school lessons are available in the channel. They had a tie-up with the this what we will the providers, and have one time is allotted for this victory channel. That is very common. Say, in that way, the lessons are available to the students through in TV, or they can have it in YouTube as well as in the mobile. That is one. Second one, they came up with another system, K-phone. It is not a phone. They will give that electric post and electric cable for using this phone fiber network also. In turn, they have to give back the data for the downtrodden, or those who are not having access to that. And through this, the electricity is, in the entire Kerala, it is covered. That means fiber network also, they put it in the entire Kerala region, whether it is Wayanad or a rural or a scheduled place or a remote place, the telephone network, they made it. I think the first phase is on. Within next 6 months, second and third phase is there. And also with regard to this TV and Gatrix for the others, mobile, because government providing is not easy, because all the government is having no deficit budget and other thing. The NGOs, the teachers, they provided TV, this mobile phone, tabs to everybody. Another thing for Indians must be knowing the Baiju learning network. They gave free access for tuition classes also. But like that, there are a lot of initiative. And I don't know, it is so interestingly, the ruling party's youth wing collected waste. That means that, plastic and other waste from, dustbin, and they sold that waste and old newspaper and got almost 11 crore rupees and used for this purpose through governmental system. That means if we can activate everybody to provide the education and facilitate the educational thing, that is the real investment. They understood, they worked in that line. The same way that Tamil Nadu also. Tamil Nadu government given laptop to all college students. But there are many initiatives coming, the government level as well as the NGO and those who are want to do the social responsibility, either way of that corporate social responsibility or professional state responsibility like that. In turn, I have not much to give. We also contributed for TV and other things, remitting the school fees like that from our salary. But that way, that kind of oneness created through this pandemic. This we have to continue with that, supporting all those who are not in a position to come up. We have to give a helping hand to them so that we can make them to mainstream. Once this pandemic situation is normal also, we have to continue to do this thing with our law teachers, those who are in the rural and urban and other South Asian region. we have to take it further so that we can make a model for others to take all our sisters and brothers with us. We can uplift them and empower them by investing in education. That's this one I want to convey. That's why. Thank you, Professor Balraj Chauhan. Thank you, sir. Professor Indira.
So nice of you. So nice of you. Pleasure to see you.
Only thing is, Professor Menon is very fond of that, rural litigation and rural development, rural education.
Exactly.
That's why, this session is very important. Must be, his blessing is coming in a different manner through Justice Duriraja, Professor Balraj Chauhan, and Professor Indira and Dr. Puneet. All the views coming and how we can help them. It is because of his vision. We are hearing from other academicians and eminent personalities. I am very happy to be in this session, and I hope this kind of deliberation we can take South Asia together, and we can make mass in the global scenario. Thank you very much.
Certainly, Kumar, your efforts are blessed by Professor Menon.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry, in between. Professor Indira and Justice.
No problem.
Okay.
And Professor Kumar, because what happens is your administrator is raising hands and say that stick to the time, right? No, I can see that it's very methodically followed up. Very nice. May I invite Ms. Indra Samarasinghe to address the gathering, please. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Justice Duriraja. I think I agree with what Professor Sivakumar said. I think he did my part, I suppose, winding up. Anyway, when all the speakers, most of the speakers, we have all the common problem. So when the wrap up, then there are certain things that I can tell. The state must take action to make policies and to provide funding. Then the students and the teachers and the lecturers. So students, we have to give awareness programs, even teachers, some innovative approaches. Then Parliament, certain acts, we also have certain acts of Parliament. We, in an emergency case, we must not wait till the last moment. We have to amend the laws. Then to provide equipment and online lecturing and face-to-face, physical and online lecturing. Only thing, I think it's better if we can provide a hybrid system, and hopefully we'll say the pandemic will be over soon. Okay. Thank you, Honorable Justice Duriraja, and all the speakers and the paper presenters.
Thank you very much.
I want Justice Duriraja to tell something in few words.
Thank you. Ms. Samarasinghe, we had last year, of course, I think before the pandemic, we were so fortunate to be at Lloyd's Law School last year by this time for the similar mode competition and the sessions. And I could still recall Mr. Tairani was forcing me to overeat because they had a spread of beautiful, very tasteful lunch. And I can remember, as usual, Mr. Venkatramani was very conscious with his food, and he said, no, I don't take more. But still, he had been forced to eat more. I could see the hospitality of the Lloyd's School, and I will never forget. Virtually, I can't remember Professor Sivkumar was there, but he came from somewhere running, and he forced me to take dessert. He said, "No, this is nice, you have to take it." So such an hospitality was shown to us at the Lloyd School. And the students, of course, I still remember, they're still in contact with me. That's still very nice of them. And saying everything, it was, hope to see you all again. I love to visit you all again. And if the opportunity comes, I love to be at Lloyd School with your friends and to meet such a wonderful people like Mr. Tairani, Dr. Salim, Mr. Venkatramani, to name a few. Of course, all of them are very, very nice. So thank you. I think we have to conclude now for them to start the valedictory session. Wish you all the very best. Thank you very much for joining. Recalling the last, the year hospitality, I'll have my own lunch cooked by my own wife. Thank you very much.
That's interesting. Okay, sir. So, may I now call upon Mr. Ravi Prakash, Advocate on Record, Supreme Court, to just speak a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Justice Thurai Raja, Judge, Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, respected R. Venkatramani sir, Senior Advocate, Professor Shiv Kumar sir, Professor Indra, Professor Lisa, Professor Dr. Salim, Professor Dr. Balraj Chauhan, Vice Chancellor, DNLU, Jabalpur, and a series of learned academicians and the paper presenters and the audience across the globe. It is indeed my privilege to begin the introductory session, valedictory session of this 3 technical session, stimulating sessions over the 2 years, over the 2 days, under the head of, under the title of Commonwealth Comparative Constitution and Public Law Project, on the subject matter theme, that is rights and liberties in pandemic, constitutional challenges and judicial response in SAARC countries. This colloquium was divided into 3 technical sessions, namely, the first session was constitutional control over exercise of exceptional and emergency power. Second, the access to justice and legal profession, fundamental safeguards. Third, the right to education during pandemic. Over the 3 sessions, the vast research which has been discussed, analyzed, and synthesized through the deliberation and presentation. It has been an enriching experience, which is not only beneficial to learn and grow as professional, but we hope to make most out of it for better preparedness to tackle the similar situations or the global problem or the global pandemic or the crisis like this in near future. Because I believe that the future disaster and crisis will be no less than global. In this global or the similar like pandemic COVID-19, 2019, as human civilization is looking forward to have a permanent base on moon or some other celestial body for interplanetary transport. In an age of virtual reality, over the 3 sessions, we all agree and we all accept that we have missed the human touch, a basic need for emotional, psychological, and physical well-being of our friends, larger family members, and the loved ones. The human touch and the interaction, meeting, it's so much missed during the last 1 year, since the world has been shut down or it has been forcibly shut down, locked down, because the nature of pandemic and the international institutions, the regulatory bodies in terms of WHO or the national regulatory bodies, they all agreed to a point that we have to break the chain of transmission. So the human touch and conduct, we are supposed to limit the restriction of meeting. We are supposed to limit and avoid the unnecessary travel across the globes, or even neighborhood, or even we are supposed not to meet or avoid the meeting to our next door neighbor. So in all this, the situation, unprecedented situation and exceptional circumstances which had been created by pandemic. It has basically impacted every aspect of the human being and the human living. Come what may, under the constitutional regime or the autocratic regime or any other governance process, it has impacted every aspect of the human life. So the COVID 2019 was an exceptional circumstance of with two distinct features. It was global in nature, impacting every aspect of life. What constitution across the globe envisaged prior to 2019 was very limited. It envisaged the exceptional and emergency situations like natural disaster in terms of earthquake, tsunami, avalanche, or war-like situations where the country were attacking or forcibly attacking to another country or the another territory in terms of military or the economic sanctions, which were they were characterized with the regional aspects or the jurisdictional crisis and had a impact on the geographical limit, or the impact was confined to a geography particularly, but not the entire globe like this, which the humanity witnessed in COVID due to the COVID-19. So now coming to the discussion over the three sessions, the experience from Maldives, the representation from Bangladesh, presentation from Sri Lanka, presentations from Afghanistan. We discussed on the very basic aspects of governance, on its impact on the constitution. For example, from the island nation like Maldives, where a substantial person, it was discussed that the substantial population is a migrant worker to the tune of 1/3 of its population. They were from the poor and underdeveloped or the developing economies. So the access to basic rights and facilities like food, shelter, medicines, health services in the island nation like Maldives was impacted, and it was determined because of the status in terms of citizens and non-citizens. So the migrant workers, when the world was shut down, Maldives was also forced to shut down. The migrant workers, that is 1/3 of its population, was in crisis. They were not even having easy access or the facility to access the health services in that country because they were non-citizens. It was a humanitarian crisis which the Maldives government could not have even envisaged or even thought of. For an island nation like Maldives, the mode and means of transportations were shut down. No ferry, no jetties, no ships to travel from one island to another island or to the capital city of Male. So as these small islands were not self-equipped or self-sufficient, there was an unprecedented crisis for the inhabitants who were stuck, or the visitors or the tourists who were stuck in these islands. We had the very fruitful discussion and the analysis that how in Maldives the pandemic impacted some of the basic feature of the constitution or the basic principles of constitutionalism, like democracy, which was it impacted the electoral process in Maldives and the new kind of corrupt practices which threatened to take away the very essence of democratic process or the democratic governance were witnessed and emerged out in the jurisdiction of Maldives. From India, we had deep and meticulous analysis of judicial response and access to justice on some of the thresholds which had been identified and accepted by the Supreme Court of India. We had the presentations where the presenters analyzed whether the Supreme Court of India responded to those thresholds or were lived up to the expectations of those thresholds which the Supreme Court itself has identified during the course of pandemic. That is the open judicial system or the open justice delivery system, easy approach to the forum or the body or the judicial courts, the decorum and respect and conduct of the various actors like judges, advocates and litigants through on the online platform, And perhaps these are the issues which had been common to all the jurisdictions of the South Nation or across the globe. The decorum and respect for the courts and the litigants, the conduct shown by the advocates and the litigants through on online platform. The impact and availability of judicial forum for in case of violation and remedy of rights, to get the disputes adjudicated in effective and efficient manner. The impact of the judicial system, which was working through is continuously working through the virtual platform on the democratic values process, unity and integrity of the nation, as well as social revolution, which each constitution of ours seeks to promise or seeks to bring the change in terms of socio-economic revolution. Honorable judges has shared their experience that how the emerging hybrid system of adjudication is being, and the various actors are responding towards it. In the criminal justice system or the criminal cases, the honorable judges are request for the physical hearing, whereas in the commercial disputes or the commercial litigations, the judges are receiving or the courts are receiving the request for hybrid, where the litigants and even the advocates would like to sit in their offices or the spaces and conduct the hearing through virtual platforms. So all these experiences raises on the question of accessibility and affordability, as well as the effective system of justice dispensation. From Bangladesh and Afghanistan, we had the two presentations on the right to education. The right to education, which is not merely right to receive an education in the formal manner or to get educated or to put the signature. No, because the constitution in pre-pandemic era or the pre-pandemic time envisaged with a host of rights or the series of rights. It got attached with the right to education, like right to nutrition, right to food, right to play and conducive environment for the children when they visit the schools. The example was taken, the example of midday meals, that how the midday meals got stopped because of the virtual platform, which was very prevalent in India and the Bangladesh. So the education system, it was not merely a right to education which got impacted. The right to nutrition and the food of the children belonging to the lower strata of the society or who could not afford the proper meal because of the economic capacity, it also got impacted. At the end, the analysis at the higher education level or the university level, the education level, the higher education or the university or colleges level, the presenters analyzed that how this right to education impacted the right to freedom of speech and expression through academic freedom. In in setup of university and colleges, where the students and faculty members or the teachers used to interact and facilitate the dialogue process, it got stopped. And it was not merely a discussion or the dialogue process, where through a series and host of activities which used to take place in the educational campuses across the globe, it got stopped. Then the significant analysis that look at the very fundamental change which had been brought in the system of education after this pandemic. Across the jurisdictions, across the globe, the university, it identified the three basic aspects of the online mode of education. The university, schools, and colleges, either they are public or mostly they are private in the jurisdiction or the South Asian jurisdiction or across the globe. Another aspect was the internet service providers, the essence of internet service providers. Mostly and almost 100% they are the private companies or the MNCs across the globe which are providing the basic facility, that is internet. The companies are not, the state is not engaged into the providing internet, or even if it is engaged into providing internet services, they are not effective, or the economic cost attached to it. The third element was the platforms like Google Class, Zoom, or the Cisco websites, which are mostly provided by the private companies or the MNCs across the globe. So the very fundamental of governance in terms of role of a state, institution, and guaranteed rights to citizens or the non-citizens gets altered in a very significant manner. The role which were traditionally being performed by the state, or the minimal use or the minimal interference by the use of the private players or the private companies or the private corporations, now they are the dominant players even in the basic facilitation of a basic right called right to education. And they control the data, they control the privacy of the classroom teachings, they control everything, intellectual property which gets generated. And forget about the emerging technologies based on artificial intelligence and the artificial intelligent classroom teachings, which will be impacting a series of other legal rights and the host of rights which were traditionally available to the teachers and the students. All this got discussed over in the technical sessions and by the paper presenters. These are the significant issues which needs to be thought at the policy level and by the policy makers or the legislation drafters or the regulatory bodies across the jurisdiction, across the globe, that who will own this intellectual property which gets created or generated over the classroom teachings. Now, some of the important discussion on right to education is, we saw coming from Professor Balraj Chauhan that the duty towards it was not mere, he did not analyze merely as a right to education rather than a duty perspective to the right to education. If I say the Hofeldian analysis of rights and duties, the dual relationships, he analyzed very beautifully his role and responsibilities as a facilitator and creating the basic infrastructure to facilitate right to education in the limited circumstances or the opportunities which were thrown open by this pandemic. The government responses under the Disaster Management Act or the Public Protection Health Act across the jurisdictions were not defined or were not significantly laid down under the legislative measures or the legislation itself. The government was clueless that what are its role under the respective Disaster Management Act or the Public Protection Health Act in case when such outbreak or where the countries and the entire economy has to be shut down for a few months or for a few months together. Analysis of education as a process of knowledge transmission from teacher to a student, where the teachers were the knowledge transmitter and the students were as a recipient, whether it was effectively received by the students or the pupil. If not, then the purpose of education gets defeated. We had an analysis on the vocational training and vocational aspects. We had the discussion on the national education policy under the recently framed by the government of India, that how it is a very forward-looking document. Professor Lisa pointed out the psychological and mental requirement of students, the non-conducive environment which gets generated or highlighted in the household, where the child feels some kind of restriction, not used to get open in front of their parents, and what are whether it is a small house or bigger house or a separate study room is there or not. She highlighted the importance of the very context in which the education is being received now through the online platform, prevailing the social and economic aspects, the economic situation prevailing in the South Asian region on the jurisdiction which are common to us. She also discussed the technology as an equalizing factor in the online mode and the online process. So the gender perspective and challenges, it also got highlighted from the Maldives that the gender and that possibly the pandemic forced the abuser to live with and the victim to live with their abusers. Because of the there was a significant increase in the gender-based crime or the gender-based violations. So because it was shut down, it was a imposed the lockdown was imposed, the gender rights also get impacted. So all these things, we had a very serious discussion. And the last aspect which I would like to highlight from the just concluded presentation, that she talked about the free distribution of electronic gadgets, including laptop and televisions by the government. Even Professor Shiv Kumar highlighted that how the state government of Kerala and Tamil Nadu were distributing this free, and it was a very welcome sign and healthy sign of the governance. I remember that few years back in 2013 or 14, the Supreme Court of India was seized with an issue whether the free distribution of TV and electronic gadgets like this by the government or the political parties or the ruling political parties will amount to corrupt electoral practices or not. But the pandemic has altered the very basic of living and the facilities. It has become now the essence to facilitate or to distribute the free electronic gadgets and provide free internet services to all citizens, whether they get influenced, whether it get translated into the votes or not. So the very over the years, over these 3 sessions, we have analyzed and we have significantly analyzed the various aspects of this, the impact which the COVID-19 has left on us, and we are still in the process of tackling it. Hopefully we all will overcome the challenges which are imposed, and that COVID-19 2019 pandemic itself, the world will come out of it. Thank you. Now over to Afsar.
Okay, now I would like to request Professor Dr. S. Shivakumar, Senior Professor, Indian Law Institute, to kindly speak a few words.
Thank you, Afsar. My esteemed friend, Professor Balraj Chauhan, beloved Senior Advocate Venkatramani Sir, Honorable Justice, my dear friends, Dr. Aglesh, Dr. Madhukar, Mr. Manohar Terani, and dear friends. I am so happy to get the feedback from narration from Ravi about the whole presentation, and I have attended many sessions also. But I am sure, I again reiterating, Professor Menon's blessing is with us. Whatever Professor Balraj Chauhan said, his thinking, thought process, vision is coming through us. We are only instrumental to putting these things. That's why this exercise is going on. I pointed out in the first inaugural session of this program, we divided this into 3 phases: teaching, lawyering, and justice delivery. Accordingly, preparing for comparative law teaching methods and impart, and preparing for comparative law lawyering, and facilitating justice delivery institution, keeping the comparative law perspective in the backdrop. Accordingly, this our deliberation is going on. We next, I assure you one thing. We when a pandemic is of course a problem. Next, when we are assembling here for the next judicial colloquium, I will definitely come with an oleum written by the people from the Asia. Not only this one, that we have planned with Korean Legislation Research Institute. That an volume titled like this, Legal Measures for Tackling Pandemic in Asia, Lessons Learned and Way Forward. That is the title. We have identified 17 countries in Asia. I know we have 48 countries in Asia, but it is impossible to take all these countries. And in Asia also, we are avoiding West Asia, but we are taking all other 4 regions: South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, Central Asia. Now we are in the process of identifying contributors. Once it is there, April and May, the contributors will contribute for this. For that also, we have given that complete structure of book also, an overview of law and policy in the country, this policy and law before COVID and during the COVID and after COVID, what we can expect. From this, what lesson we learned, how we are to tackle. This is the book structure. Every country will come with a 10,000 words and we will put it as an oleum. Then on the basis of that, we will have which is the best practices. Practice is feasible for Asia, because Asian continental is having lot of similarities and other thing. That thing already initiated. I think I am thankful to Korean Legislative Institute for that. They are spending 50 lakh rupees for that. Because they are saying during pandemic, everybody is having the crunch of money. They are giving each contributor $2,000. I request our August gathering, if you are interested to contribute, you can express your interest with your CV and credibility to me. And we need not only contributors, the experts from their respective country for vetting also. For that, we want another set of 17 people to review the contribution. There also we fixed 12,500 Indian rupee for giving a remuneration, because that we are not going to compromise on quality. Whatever time and intellectual thing you are, our colleagues are spending and putting that effort, we have to compensate very little. That way, we will come out with this volume in November, December, and when we will meet next time as a SARC Judicial Colloquium, this is my promise. I will come to this forum with the book, most probably e-book or printed book, whatever may be. I am assuring you, I will stand before you with that book, how the Asia learned the lesson from pandemic to tackle this pandemic season. What are the legal measures, how we handle, and what is the way forward. That is the one idea. Second, we will come with you must be knowing, you heard this one, the CIGER is there. I request all the panelists here, kindly contribute to that. We are announcing an online certificate course on comparative public law in 5 phases. Even now that CIGR and Lloyd Law College, If Professor Balraj Chauhan is happy to involve in one certificate course, we can have jointly also, we can do accordingly. Under the mentorship of Mr. Venkatramani sir, we will able to have this comparative law public online certificate course. That duration and other thing, Venkatramani sir will decide, and we will have for 5 different set of people. One for students, one for teachers, one for lawyers, next for judicial aspirants and judges, whatever may be, if they are. And the last one for the NGOs as well as 4th and 5th estate of our country. Not in a India perspective, we can have it Asia, Commonwealth and other jurisdiction. How comparative public law, that one course, another course, comparative constitution and constitutionalism. The third course, third aspect is on the basis once with this mentoring of, I request Venkatramani sir, under his leadership, we will do the formulate a curricula and do it this exercise. After this exercise is over, after 6 months, before next colloquium, we will come with a model curricula for the globe. How we can do it or not. That will be best for the law schools in the undergraduate level, graduate level, and also for the judicial education level. That is the thing I want to propose to you. I think we can request all the judges of this South Asia region, all the senior academics, Professor Balraj Chauhan and Professor Lakshminath, Professor B.C. Nirmal, and all the youngsters. They are very vibrant people in this thing. With this online, I would suggest don't give anything free. We can have, I will request Mr. Manohar Tehrani, whenever you are planning, we can have a fees also. Whatever we are giving, taking with a small cost, it will have a weightage or have a value. That way we have to organize. I am with you. If Venkatramani sir and Professor Balraj Chauhan agrees for this, we can work out for this, and we will take his vision so that the continuing education, the add-on system will work. It will be good for the institution for putting their credibility for ranking and other thing. At the same time, our people will get the correct, the vision how you are to compare the constitution so that you can apply that constitution and public law in a very proper manner while lawyering as well as doing the justice delivery aspect. This is my random thought. I am putting before you all this thing. When I am so ambitious, that's why I put many things together. I think Professor Menon only taught me like this. You think for not sky is the limit, the outer space is the limit. I am putting the same way, but I think nothing is impossible. This will be possible if we are joining together, and we can achieve, and we will come with the come again back to this forum in the next colloquium. We will give what we have done, where we failed, what are our shortcomings. We can rectify that also. Even these words, I thank everybody from Professor Balraj Chauhan, Justice Thurai Raja, to the youngsters, those who are they are the next generation people. They have to take it forward. I think we are old. Once we crossed 50 means we would say we are old. We are not that much vibrant. These youngsters will take it forward. Under the we have an senior advocate, very young mind is with us. He will mentor us so that we can go and we can prove this Menon's vision. We are trying to implement his vision in a humble way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to
We are
invite.
with you, Professor Shiv Kumar.
Yes. Thank you, Professor. We will come back to you.
We are with you.
Because I am expecting a consent from Venkatramani sir. If he is saying, we will go ahead with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite Mr. R. Venkatramani, sir, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, for the valedictory address.
Professor Sivakumar, let me first tell you that what you shared with us are not random thoughts. They became a sequential process of your deep reflection of our common engagement in the pursuit of fulfilling Professor Menon's visionary insights and dreams. So they are part of a scheme, and your thought process reflects it very effectively. And secondly, by outlining the programs that you had in mind, you probably seem to have given me a 5-year intellectual plan and journey. So I must plan for the next 5 years of my own intellectual plan and journey, and to how to tune them with all those very ambitious ideas which you have sown in the last few minutes. We are all with you, and I think we should all travel together. I tried to visualize how Columbus would have traveled from Europe to the shores of US. The first expedition was a failure. He learned a lot of lessons from the expedition. He went back to the European shore and the Spanish king and asked for more grants for a second expedition. The second expedition was considered, and of course, if some of you are interested in reading where Columbus landed first and where he landed second, it's a very interesting story. But the moral of the story is that when we charter, humanity begins to charter its courses of action on uncharted oceans. We have both surprises, we have both failures, and also on top of it, the satisfaction which comes to us on achieving even what we would have not dreamt of. And precisely what is happening today across the globe. The challenge, if today in the 3 colloquium, and the theme of the colloquium has not been about pandemic, what else would have been discussing? In the midst of COVID, could we have discussed some esoteric themes? Obviously, no. In the midst of COVID and the pain and the tribulations it brought about, could we have discussed mere abstract subjects? Even say rule of law, probably the answer would have been no. We were therefore very pertinently and relevantly discussing the impact and the unseen dimensions, the impact of a phenomenon like this. And where will constitution, law, and governments can relook, redevise, and redesign their own respective roles. So the 2.5 days deliberations, I think, have given us rich dividends on how the experience of the shared, the lessons are being learned. But from these lessons, we probably need to go a few more steps, as I said, like the Columbus second expedition, and to land somewhere. And where shall we land and how shall we land? These are very important questions. I think while we look at each country's contributions and the peculiar experiences that you have shared with us. And particularly, Ravi Prakash was repeatedly talking about maladies. And what comes to mind immediately on looking at it is the real test of certifying any system, its efficacy, utility, and its value. All that must be with reference to the quality of its service to the least equipped social order, or most deprived sections of a society, and not with reference to the economically advanced country or the creamy layers of any society. So if therefore we are looking, if this is the real test, there are several actors and players in the field who have to meet this test and come out with some kind of a certification that they have passed the test. So I think one important proposition I would like to suggest, because we are all a congregation of law schools, academics, very eminent judges from across Asia, and well-meaning students, and because we are now looking at what the next century can provide for the deprived sections of communities all over the world. So I think one important lesson which I think, the proposition which can be suggested is, if technology was one tool with its manifest and manifold utilities and values and relevance, whether it is in the field of medicine, in the field of education, or in the field of information. So today we have a technology system and which can serve a wide range of needs of human beings. And not necessarily from the point of view of an enhancement of the quality of life, but more importantly, because we are so connected by technology, technology has become part of our life. And therefore, if there can be a technology access and distribution framework, through a framework of law, you may put it like that, I think we should start working on that. And how will the framework will look at distribution of technology, distribution of resources, and facilitating and enabling environment, and the respective roles and obligations of state instrumentalities, and even private actors. I think it's important that we have reached in a stage in human history when Constitution will have to probably look at different roles of different actors in the society. The old thinking that public law, private law, etc., I think must sooner or later disappear. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have many constitutions are struck with notions of state, concept of state, and access to justice in the context of concept of state. I think we need to slowly move away from this very archaic system, and we will have to discover access to justice in more meaningful ways, whether the artificial early 20th century or 19th century barrier will disappear. Therefore, I think very strongly in terms of a technology access and distribution framework, which must be probably given attention by law schools and law students and also academics. And I think one important reason why I would urge in support of such a proposition is that if every constitution, like for instance, the Indian Constitution talks about in Article 39, that the material resources of the community shall be so distributed as to subserve the common good. And in a couple of judgments, Supreme Court of India went on to say that material resources are not merely natural resources, but it also include man-made resources. Therefore, we have a very comprehensive conception of the material resources of the community, and technology is one such material resource. Not only because it's man-made, it is made, if it is made, conceived, designed, and marketed for profit, I think with every such profit understanding, there has to be an obligation tag attached to it. I understand that technology as a material resource must be subject to a constitutional and social distribution so as to subserve the common good. And how do you subserve the common good? By going down to the bottom or the bottom layers of the community where access becomes a challenging proposition. And therefore, that's one way all of us have seen that whether it is children getting online education or lawyers logging into virtual hearing, there are some common problems. And there are some challenges. I read from a write-up on post-COVID, the aftermath of challenges in the European continent. I didn't find anything very significantly different from what would be in any other continent of the world. So the aftermath would going to generate more and more problems, and which courts will have to probably face and find out, very significant and qualitatively different solutions. And there also, I think we need to look at the post aftermath of COVID-19 whenever it happens, and we'll have to take stock of the challenges which have arisen during this period and the deficiencies and failures which have also emerged during this period, and how do we look at them. So the entire administration of justice system will also have to be probably revisited from these angles, in order that those who have suffered more during this period shall not be subjected to additional deprivations and a greater burdens as far as access to justice is concerned. And these are a few thoughts I wanted to share with all of you, and I'm sure that each and every one of you, very eminent judges who have been constantly, participating in this program organized in honor of Professor Menon, and those very eminent academics. I think all of us are driven by one common urge today, namely that if the challenge is so unseen, the challenge is so vast, the capacity and the competence of each and every one of us will not be lacking at all. And that's a great commitment which brings us together today. And I'm sure that we move further, this commitment will continue to push us into exploring the unexplored frontiers of administration of justice and doing justice and access to justice. And with these words, I'd like to conclude and thank all the participants who have been pouring in their mind, their heart, and their commitment and their compassionate involvement in this great exercise. We will very soon, I think we'll very soon look forward to meet in the physical space and to regather all the enriched ideas which have been presented today and to find out where have we marched ahead. More than Columbus-like. Thank you for all of us.
Thank you very much, sir. And I would now like to call upon Dr. Akhilesh Kumar Khan, Deputy Director, Lloyd Law College, to kindly address the gathering for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Afsar, sir. I think I'm audible, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the distinguished guests of the valedictory functions. Professor Dr. S. Siva Kumar, Senior Professor, Indian Law Institute, former member, Law Commission of India. Mr. R. Venkatramani, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Professor Dr. Balraj Chauhan, Vice Chancellor, DNLU, Jabalpur. Professor Dr. Lisa P. Lucas, Professor Guru Gobind Singh University, Indraprastha University. Dr. Mohammad Salim, Director, Lloyd Law College. Dr. Madhukar Sharma. The country heads, national administrators, coaches, distinguished dignitaries from bar, bench, and academia, renowned academicians, and dear students. It is a matter of great pride for me to offer the vote of thanks at this innovative forum, which aimed at engaging academicians, law practitioners, and members of the bench to deliberate on such a significant issue, the Colloquium on Rights and Liberties in Pandemic, Constitutional Challenges and Judicial Response in SAARC countries. The world has suffered together, and it has become pertinent to discuss how the states across the South Asian countries have initiated to serve their people, maintaining their rights. It is also a very substantial time to question and assess how the judiciary respond under such health crisis which has taken over the world. These 2 days have brought out very thought-provoking deliberations. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Mr. Justice Abu Tahir Muhammad Saifur Rahman, Judge, Supreme Court of Bangladesh High Court Division, for his time. His Lordship has joined as the chief guest of the inaugural function yesterday, 20th March 2021. I would also like to humbly thank Honorable Mr. Justice S. Thurai Raja, Judge, Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. It was his Lordship's large-heartedness that he accepted to chair the third session of the colloquium today on right to education during pandemic. Lordship, your presence has enlightened the session. Thank you very much for your kind presence, Lordship. I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Dr. S. Sivakumar, Senior Professor, Indian Law Institute and former member, Law Commission of India, Honorary South Mooting Administrator, for his continuous and untiring support. Sir has been the initiator of the mooting competition and of the colloquium too. He wished that a platform be established which will involve the bar bench and academia to bring about exchanges and further lead to the strengthening of justice in these regions and become an example for the world. Thank you very much for initiating this platform, sir. I would humbly thank Mr. R. Venkatramani, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, for Sir's gentle guidance and his scholarly input, not just through these 3 days, but around the year. Sir, your presence and your words are thought-provoking, inspiring, and motivating to us. Please guide us in different occasions whenever we need you, sir. Thank you very much for your non-ending support, sir. It is always a privilege to have Professor Dr. Balraj Chauhan as a speaker on these kind of platforms. Sir, sir is continuously guiding our students on several occasions through his marvelous lectures. Sir, thank you very much for your continuous support to us. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Dr. Lisa P. Lucas for her never-ending support to me individually and professionally in all academic endeavors of Lloyd Law College. Thank you very much, Madam, for your mentorship and support. I extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. Manohar Therani, President, Lloyd Law College, for his untiring support and his continuous motivation to all of us. It is with your support and guidance, sir, that we are able to take up newer challenges in the field of law school teaching and learning. Thank you very much for your support, sir. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Ravi Prakash, Advocate on Record, Supreme Court of India. It is with your enthusiasm year after year that we at Lloyd come up with moot propositions which are closely related to issues being deliberated upon in the actual court of law. It is your keen perspective on the delivery of rights and justice that has helped the conceptualization of the colloquium topics. Thank you very much, sir, for your continuous guidance. Now, I would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Salim, Director, Lloyd Law College, for his very presence, motivate us to excel each year in the organization of these events. I would also like to mention thank you to Dr. Madhukar Sharma, Deputy Director Academics, for the smooth completion of this colloquium. Thank you very much, sir. I extend my humble gratitude to distinguished speakers of the technical sessions, which includes the judges from Supreme Court of South Asian region, Vice Chancellor from law schools, faculty members from renowned institutions across the South Asian regions of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Maldives, Dubai, and advocate on record and members of the bar, each of you has led to initiating very strong deliberations on such an important issue. There have been discussions on public health, civil, political, and economic rights, and the use of power by ruling bodies, to name a few. I hope that these issues will further to be taken up by each one of you and bring prominent changes to the society. With this, I close my speech. Thank you once again to all of you. Looking forward for your participation and support in the next edition of the South Asian Mooting Competition, Law Students and Conference, also the Colloquium. Thank you, everyone. I think Venkatramani sir wants
Yes, Dr. Madhukar, Venkatramani sir want to speak.
Yes, yes.
No, for a vote of thanks, it is not good manners to speak again. But in the thick of COVID last year, I penned a couple of verses. I thought one verse would be worthy of being shared with all. If Dr. Khan gives me permission, I will read that. Okay. The title of this is "Why Are You Waiting?" Why are you waiting? The long arms of the clock never stop ticking. Roll up your bed with stains of the past. Close up your lens with the lines too dark. Close all the books so dense in the libraries of your mental shelf. Shed all the truths you learned in divisions kept us for too long. Why are you waiting? The leisure you had in the past is dead. Few are in comforts, many are in pains. All your thoughts and codes of rules, which were in paces slow and sloth, are in trial before a court too strong. Equal, all we cried a lot. Equal, all we wrote a lot. Equal, all we thought a lot. In leisure, we sought answers lot. Nature, God, or what you may, is drawing lines on what you can. Nature, God, or what you may, is showing holes in your thoughtless paths. Law and justice, goods and markets, fair in new scores, shared in new ways. Looking back, you dare not do to rewrite old ways in phrases new. Why are you waiting? Ideologies and histories old will tell you all old is gold. Mind be young, mind be free, mind be strong and be a midwife of new songs. Race and caste and all those words which choked our nostrils and choked our lungs are Bronze Age brittle mental wares. Rewrite your rules, rethink your ways, relook your thoughts, reload your minds. Why are you waiting? Thank you for your attention.
Sir, we can have a resolution also. 2021 resolution. We will start first comparative constitutional law course with we and DNLS Jabalpur together, and we will announce. We will announce in the month of. There is no financial commitment for this one. We will make all this thing. If Venkatramani sir will agree, we will start that course in the month of May. Professor Menon's birthday, we will launch the first course, May 4th.
Yes, I will come back. Yeah.
Yes. We will come with the proposal so that you can be also joined.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because true follower of Professor Menon is Professor Balraj Chauhan. That's why we want to do it with him. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.